IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Ryan Roberts. I'm Brian Driscoll. We got a lot to talk about today. So, our main topic today, Ryan, is going to be talking about the Notre Dame South Carolina bowl game. We'll get into that. Obviously, predictions are starting to come out. We're going to kind of talk about what expectations should be, why the predictions were made against Notre Dame, and if there's merit to those predictions. And should the things they focused on, it was ESPN and Sporting News, be things that, we look at? Ironically, Ryan, the group that we probably hammer as much as ESPN, if not more, Pro Football Focus, they had a story come out. They actually predicted Notre Dame to win a 3-point game. All the predictions were really close games. So we'll get into that. A couple other bits of news that we'll get into. Obviously, the NCAA announced a new president today. We'll talk briefly about that. We'll talk more about him sort of after signing day as we learn more and we hear more about what his agenda is. And there was a report. Somebody said, I was listening to Malik and Sean show earlier, and somebody in the chat said that he was on a show talking about how NIL is number one. I didn't see that comment, so I really can't address, whether he's going to take it on or whatever the case may be. So we'll have plenty to say about that down the road. But, I do think that was interesting. And then, of course, we'll start things off, Ryan, with a little bit about Peyton Bowen. So we have told y'all we will tell you when things change, and we believe things have changed. So we put an intel piece on the message board last night. That intel piece, by the way, we stand by. We stand by what was told to us, the quality of the sources. I don't back down from that at all. I have no problem with what Peyton Bowen tweeted last night. I mean, I'll have more to say about that last night, but I understand he feels he has to say what he has to say. All good. I don't care. I know what I was told. I know how many sources I talked to get that information, and I feel good about it. The only regret I have, Ryan, is, as I told you and I told Sean, I wish I would have put the dollar amount out there because that's what everybody focused on. Yeah. But like I said, the intel I got was sound. But the reality of it, however, is that whatever the dollar amount was, it's not looking good for Notre Dame right now. And that's what we got last night. So the intel that we got, I'll get a little bit of it. And because, again, a lot of that stuff is for the message board. But basically, Oregon, Oklahoma have upped their game in this situation, if you guys catch my drift, a.k.a. NIL. And they're making a run at Peyton. And now everything that Peyton Bowen had been telling Notre Dame and Notre Dame commits up until, yesterday afternoon has changed. And now it's not looking good for Notre Dame. So I don't know what there's a lot for Notre Dame to do on this one. So they're battling. I talked, the sources that I talked to last night on the Notre Dame side of it still feel like they're competing. They're battling. They're not going to stop. They're not going to back down. They're going to still take their shot. And so there's still communication going on there. And that's all you can ask for if you're Notre Dame. So, but obviously we've heard from some other sources that this is what's going on. So Peyton had Oregon in his house last night. Oklahoma is going to be by the house on Friday. Notre Dame is going to try to get in tonight. That's basically where things stand. But as of right now, if we had to make a prediction, it's not looking, or not going to make a prediction, but if we're saying where it's trending, it's not trending in a good direction right now, Ryan, for Notre Dame. And we'll get into more about it when things become official. It's obviously if it happens, it would be a big loss. Peyton Bowen is the top player in his class from a talent standpoint. So it'll certainly have an impact, but we'll get into more of that once things kind of sort out. Because as of right now, Peyton Bowen's still a Notre Dame commit. He hasn't decommitted as far as I know from Notre Dame. He hasn't, at least officially, he hasn't told them, as far as I know, that he's not coming. But we do believe that there's reason to believe that could happen sooner rather than later, but it hasn't as of right now. And so, we'll see how it plays out, Ryan. So there's still a lot to this story that will be written and a lot more to talk about. If you want to get into what we reported last night specifically, I didn't even reported, wasn't a report, something, the intel that we dropped on our premium message board that people took illegally and put out in other spaces. I think those people are scumbags, but there's not a lot I can do about that right now. We are consulting some people that know the law, and we'll have some things that are going to change about that moving forward. But so it was what we discussed last night, and I stand by it. If you want to get into that conversation, more than welcome to have it. But the format for that is the message board. That's the reality of it. If you want to ask specifically about the situation, about Peyton, you can do that, and we'll discuss it in the mailbag. But we're not going to turn this show into the Peyton Bowen show, which is, the mailbag. I'm sure a lot of questions that we'll get to in the mailbag, but that's kind of where things stand right now, Ryan.
Yep. I mean, what better way to say it, right? Like, I mean, for the people that are in the chat, for the most part, I think you guys all kind of frequent the message board, at least a large percentage of you guys, right? And unfortunately, for the people that don't, or fortunately, I guess, I don't know how you're going to look at that, people leaked some information. So now a lot of people know about it. So, and I'll just say this, man, there's a lot of pushback, there's a lot of backlash, there's a lot of people that
Not a lot. It's just loud.
On Twitter.
Small. Yeah, but I don't even get a lot there. It's just a small number of very loud people. So
and all I'll say is if you're one of those loud people, let's see how everything works itself out before we pass judgment and call stuff clickbait and such.
Sure. It can't be clickbait if I didn't put it out.
That's what I didn't
advertise it. Right. I didn't tweet it out. I didn't say, hey, come check out what we put on the message board.
Brian, literally someone called it clickbait on Twitter. I was like, I don't think you quite understand what a message board is. You're calling it clickbait.
Right. Well, but it'd be one thing if we took it and because sometimes we'll take an intel piece and we'll tweet it out. Hey, we got an intel piece. Sign up for the message board. What's the design of that? It's legitimate intel, but our design to say, hey, people, we got some intel. Come to the message board, check it out. Sometimes we'll do that. We didn't do that with this. I had no intention of doing that with this. This was something that was for the message board people only. So can't really be clickbait if that's the case, right? And look, people are going to say what they're going to say, Ryan. That's fine. It doesn't bother me. I mean, it's all good. So the people on our site, they got it. So, so that's kind of where we're at. So props to the Notre Dame staff. They're battling. They're not backing down. And that's why ultimately I think Marcus Freeman is going to win here, whether it's with Peyton Bowen or without, right? Yes. And the key for me is I want to see how things go when Marcus Freeman gets in there and looks Peyton and his family in the eye and hear what they have to say. Yeah. That'll be interesting. And I'm not saying that as a shot. It's like there's people say, well, he played Notre Dame. Maybe, right? I mean, I guess we'll find out, but I have a hard time. You and I have gotten to know his family pretty well. I have a hard time believing that. Right? Yeah. And so you wonder if all the voices around him have kind of gotten in his head with if Coach Freeman's able to get in the home tonight and have that sit down with all the other coaches, will it be those voices get drowned out and it's a reminder of why you picked Notre Dame in the first place, or will it, go a different direction? Right. That's what we'll find out.
And I wouldn't count out Marcus Freeman, right? If there's one guy that could flip the script and get it back in your favor, it's probably him, right? Like he's one of those guys. So and this is one thing though, Brian, like I just want people to understand, I would love Peyton Bowen to be in this class, right? Like I don't want him to not be in this class so we're proven right or something dumb like that, right? Like I want Notre Dame to be very successful. So I hope Marcus Freeman visits him tonight and the rest of the coaches and he knocks it out of the park. I do. And I hope that they reaffirm that commitment. That's what I hope.
Be great. Again, it's not trending that direction, but I'm not counting out Marcus Freeman and his staff just yet. So we'll see how it plays out. So that's the latest on the Peyton Bowen situation. Again, we'll talk more about that on the message board. We'll get more into some other things and whatever else you want to ask. And that's what the message board's about, right? It's discussion, dialogue, and some conversations that we can have that is not supposed to be for public consumption. But some people don't respect that, and it is what it is. Other bit of news that we'll briefly talk about is the NCAA did, in fact, name a new president today. It is Charlie Baker, who was recently the governor of Massachusetts. He was a Republican governor of Massachusetts. We don't talk politics here, but I will say this. The one thing that I'll say as an outside looking in without knowing a lot about it, if you're going to be a Republican governor of Massachusetts, which is a pretty heavily Democratic statement of fact, not of judgment, you have to be someone that's willing to work with people you don't always agree with to come to solutions that you're comfortable with.
Sure.
I think a lot of people have said, you got a politician. He's got some private sector experience in the the health industry and things like that. But the reality is the only way the NCAA is going to fix this is through legislation. Because right now the NCAA is too afraid to do it through the courts. They've lost a lot in the courts recently, and they're afraid to fight this in the courts. So it's going to have to come down to some level of legislation that happens between the schools, between the conferences, and then, of course, the federal government. And then there's a lot of state laws that are different And so if you're in one state, you are working with different rules than you are in another state, which makes the whole thing just a mess. So it's a very complicated issue. My guess is the NCAA is bringing in someone with a political background, knowing that this is going to have to be a political solution at this point in time. And I hate that because I hate political solutions. I do, especially at the federal level. I'm just not a big fan. But at this point in time, I don't know what else. I don't know what else they could be.
Brian, it's one of those things, man, where I don't know what to expect from him. I don't know enough about Mr. Baker. Like, I just don't,
Right.
you know, but I just look, at the end of the day, there needs to be some changes to be made. Has to, right? So if this is the voice of reason and the voice of that initiative happening, I'm all for it. You know, I don't know enough about him from a from a morality level, from a personal level, from a legislative, like, I don't know anything about this person.
If he's pro NIL, anti NIL, if he likes it the way it is, we don't know those things.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we heard like a little tidbit that he spoke about NIL, and but
we didn't hear it. So right,
yeah, exactly. Right. So I'll wait and I'll be open minded to see what his ideas are, what he plans on doing, and again, something needed to change, right? So maybe this is the change that brings on great things. I don't know if it will be, but I'm hopeful because I mean, I put out a tweet last night, man, that. And this was not just the Peyton Bowen thing last night. No. It's not, because college football is dying, man. Yeah. It is. Whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, with the NIL, transfer portal, with everything that's happening right now, and not just because of those layers of it, because there's nothing mandated, there's no regulations, there's no help, there's no education. This is the Wild West right now, man, and something's got to change. It does. If nothing changes, this is going to get even worse, because now people are starting to figure out what they can take advantage of, what they don't have to. What they don't have to. You can
tell a kid whatever you want. It's not a contract, and when the kid gets there, and you're not giving them what you're giving them, like we'll talk about this in another show, Ryan. But I had a very long conversation with somebody last night, and he said that I could kind of share broadly what was happening, but there's a lot of issues going on. Fran Fraschilla tweeted about this last night before all this other stuff blew up. Josh Pate talked about it, and I don't know. I don't really know Josh Pate. People have been sending me some clips he sent lately. I was like, well, this guy's pretty sharp, right? He does some really interesting stuff last night about, what's being promised to these kids is not what is going to be happening, right? And so you're looking at it where kids are being promised X, and then they get there and they're not getting what they're supposed to be getting.
Exactly.
Well, what's the recourse? Hey, I was promised something illegally, and they're not paying me. It's like that scene from Pony XS, the great 30 for 30 on SMU. Yep. He's like, what are you going to say? Right? This guy agreed to take a buyout, and he's not honoring the agreement. Like, what are you going to say? And here's the problem. This is why this whole thing is dirty, because these kids don't have protections. They don't have an advocacy group saying, hey, here's how this is going to work. Here's what we're going to do. They just got schools coming in saying, no, we'll give you this, we'll give you this, we'll give you this. It's not writing, because they can't put it in writing. It's illegal. And so then these kids get there, they make these life-changing decisions, because everybody says this, X amount of dollars is life-changing money. Yes, it is. But it's not always a good change. And I could give you 100 lottery winners stories of how their lives were destroyed by the $1 billion they got, or whatever the case may be. That life-changing money is not always a change for the better.
If you don't know how to use it.
Right. Well, not only that, but if the decisions you have to make to get that money are not things that are gonna enhance you as a football player, as a young man, and all these other things. First of all, $2 million, cut that in half, okay? Because the government's taking half of that, right? Sure. Which is why the government wants this. I mean, think about that tax bill they're going to get from all the kids, that are going to Oregon or Oklahoma or wherever else. That's why politicians want this. I mean, we've said this from the beginning. But number two, there's no protections for these kids when they get screwed over. Other than what? Fine, let's jump in the portal. Yeah, but if there's going to be schools like, no thanks. Like, we don't want that action. And then you show up, and the kid on the team's like, hold on a second, I'm a 3-year starter. And I'm getting $10,000. And this cat hasn't played a snap, and he's getting X amount of dollars. Like, forget that. There's a lot of stuff going on that's killing the game. And people think, well, it's just you don't like kids getting NIL. I'm all for NIL. All for it. This is not NIL. Said it a million times. This is not NIL. This is pay for play,
man.
Bingo.
Yep.
And so will he change that or not? I don't know. But the reality is right now you can only change it through legislation at this point in time, because the NCAA has shown we are afraid of fighting this the way they've always fought things, which is through the courts.
Sure.
That's the problem.
Yeah, and I think that, again, Brian, like, I don't know enough about this. I don't know enough about Baker to make a real opinion on him, right? But the fact that something is happening tells me that at least they understand that there may be there's a problem there, right? Like, they're not. I don't think that they are deafening to the fact that there is a problem that needs to be taken care of, and that's one of the major issues. Transfer portal, all this stuff. It's chaos right now, man. Yeah. Like, it is. And it's, I mean, there's literally bidding wars for kids right now.
Right.
Like, it's bidding wars. It's not, and bidding wars that you don't know if they're legit on either side. Right. Like, it's because, I mean, you mentioned, like, what if, a 3-year starter with a guy coming in, but what if the kid that this school offers a bunch of money to also comes in and he isn't as good as you thought he was, right? Then you're like, are you going to give him all his money if you don't think he's that good? Like, it's just.
Right.
It's a lot of fine lines here, man, that are very blurred right now. Very blurred.
And it's not good for the game.
No,
it's not.
It's not.
It's not. And it's not good for young people. I don't care. They're getting money. Some maybe. Yeah. But again, if you feel going down this path is going to be best for you, but yet you go down a different path simply because of money, maybe it works out. But a lot of times it doesn't.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate thing. It's going to be interesting to kind of follow how these kids play and how these teams perform. Like, I mean, look at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I mean, what they reportedly, and so what I've heard from different sources is they promised a lot. They haven't delivered on a lot of that. Like, people think these kids are transferring because the team wasn't very good. No, it's because they're not delivering on what was promised. And that's the only reason some of those kids went there.
Yep.
And look how that team performed with all that talent.
And not only the promises, but I mean, we talked about this a little bit last night, Brian. Like, if someone offered me, let's say I get $1 million in my pocket as a true freshman, am I going to work as hard as I did before that? Like, I think there's some merit to saying, like, you don't know how a person's going to react to that much money for a kid that's never had that much money either, right? So it's just, I feel like right now we're in the test period, right? Like, it's like, let's see how many mistakes we can make over the next couple years, and let's try to figure out the best way to find the solutions. And it's just, I feel like we could have been in front of this guy, been like, hey, we're going to put these in place to educate these guys, put some regulations on certain things, be advocate for the pro player, the NIL conversation, but to actually assist players in making good decisions, being a part of a team, making the right process for themselves. And I just feel like there wasn't enough foresight in this in the NIL landscape.
Oh, I think they knew. I think I can't possibly accept the fact that these people didn't know this was going to happen. I can't accept that. Right? I can't believe that this many people are that stupid. You and I sitting here called all this. People in the chat called this. You're telling me that we saw this coming, but these people that have achieved the things they've achieved in their lives. Now, again, just because you're a good doctor or professor doesn't mean that you are good at these other things, but there was a level of common sense to this that they had to know. I told a friend of mine today, you know what I think is happening, Ryan, and we'll move on to the Notre Dame topic because I don't want this to turn into an NIL show. We will have an NIL show, trust me, after signing day. I think they're almost wanting this to happen. Fine, this is what you want, go for it, and watch the chaos that ensues. You want to get paid, you want to sue about transfer. Okay, fine, we'll give you everything you want and see what happens. And they come crying to me when well, it doesn't work out, or you're mad about, hey, I was promised this and they didn't give it to me, and blah blah. Okay, fine. I actually think part of me thinks that they want this system to fail. Then they can step in as the savior.
Be the hero.
I would not put it past them, because then it's like, I can't force this upon you, but if you come begging to me, please help us, then then I can have more sway. But there's going to be a lot. There's going to have to be some sort of, like, I'm not a fan, Ryan, of the union, right? Like, some people believe in like a union for players. I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And people believe in, these kids should be employees. Careful what you wish for, because employees can be fired. We've talked about that. But I do think at this point in time, there needs to be some level of representation where every 2 years or 3 years or whatever, college football players as a whole get to vote for someone that represents them, a group of people, whether it's former players, former coaches, whatever, people that will represent them at the bargaining table for this, because that's going to be the path this is going to go down, Ryan. It's going to have to be. They're going to have to get a cut of these new TV contracts and these new shoe deals beyond just the free gear that they get. Now, part of this is education. Educating kids on how much they already are getting. Like, how much did you pay for all that Under Armour gear that you have? Right. Well, let's add up how much that is. Okay. Right. We've given you $17,000 worth of free gear this year, or whatever the case may be. Right. Your scholarship equals this, this, and this. So, hey, fellas, understand your value and understand that this is part of that value. Now, let's look at the total equation of what the school makes. What's this? This is the pie that we're now cutting into. Because what's lazy and people, the NCAA made $6 billion last year. Okay. Like, if I told you how much Irish Breakdown, grossed this year, to be like, wow, you guys did it. Yeah, but I got to pay Ryan out of that. I got to pay Sean out of that, and the other Sean out of that, and Vince out of that, and Bill Bender and Bill Troche out of that, and John Garcia out of that. And then I got to pay the government more than I'm paying anybody else out of that, Then I got to pay for flights. I got to pay for new equipment. I got to pay. And all of a sudden, that gross is not looking like, you thought it would be, and so that's what people understand. Like, okay, they made $6 billion, but what were the costs of different things, right? And those are the things you have to factor in. But I think an education with these young people would matter, Ryan, because if they understand that, then they understand what's remaining, and then they say, okay, that's the piece of the pie that we believe we deserve something from. Right. And if it's something as simple like, hey, every student athlete that maintains an X GPA and is in good standing in this regard gets X amount of dollars, and do it that way, whether you're a 5-star quarterback or whatever else. And the only other things that you can have are, once you are enrolled, you can then have an opportunity to go improve upon that with your name, image, likeness in the correct manner. So not collectives, where kids are just getting, like, these collectives are a hot mess, right? Like the collective that Brady Quinn is trying to get by. There's stipulations involved. You got to be in good academic standing. You've got to be involved with community service. So you're going to have a positive outreach on your community. And in turn, you're going to get rewarded for being the starting quarterback at Notre Dame or the All-American tight end at Notre Dame, right? Those are good. I support that. And honestly, players on the team would support that too. Hey, we know why so-and-so is getting paid here, because did you watch that dude? Like, do you think there's a single Notre Dame player that's jealous of the money that Michael Mayer or Isaiah Foskey made? They're like, no, that's that dude. If I want to make that kind of money, I should probably set all the records at this school that has too. And most kids are that way, as long as here's the thing. Because why do you still respect Michael Mayer? Because he's getting all this money, but he's still showing up every day, putting in work.
Yeah.
Right. Isaiah Foskey's still showing up every day, putting in work. And that's when kids are like, hey, yo, good for you. If I want to get mine, then I got to do what that guy does. Right. That's where it needs to be. That's a life lesson that these young people can get behind. Hey, you want something in life? Earn it. Right. And that I can get behind, Ryan. Those are the kind of changes that we're going to have to see. And then you've got to create a system of punishment that's got some teeth to it, that you can't have these conversations with kids until they're enrolled in your school. You want to talk about what your current players are making, fair game. You can't offer a kid, you will make this until the kid gets at school, because then you're not offering that kid that kind of money. Hey, bro, you're third string safety right now, but I was a 5-star. You're the third string safety right now, right? You want to get that money? Go earn it.
I mean, and too, Brian, like I feel like right now with how the system is intact, we're punishing the teams that are trying to do it right. because they're getting outbid. They don't have the resources to give this player X this amount. And then they're the ones that are losing out on a lot of talent that would otherwise want to be at that school. But then what are the repercussions? Is the NCAA going to handle if they're turned in for, unfair compensation or pay for play? Like there's no justice to it right now, right? Like there's no repercussions for any of the actions that are not legitimate NIL situations, which just makes it maddening, it honestly makes it very sad, if I'm being honest, right? Like last night I was just sitting there, I'm just like, man, this stinks. Like this just is not fun right now, man. Like, and it's not even the Notre Dame side of things. It's not even a program side of things. Like I'm literally watching, I'm just like, so many people are just getting bad advice, getting shafted, getting like, it's just not right. Like good people are being punished for not doing illegal things right now, which is just, it's not right. Just not right.
I'm ready to move on to a more happy, fun topic, right? And that is Notre Dame's bowl game. And South Carolina coming into town. They're coming into this bowl game, Ryan, off two of the better back-to-back wins of this. I mean, you could make a case that no team had a 2-week result like they had. I mean, can you think of anybody? I can't think of anybody. They beat, number 1 Tennessee? No, number 3 Tennessee, because Georgia had not – they were number 1 when they lost to Georgia, correct? Yes. Tennessee was number 1, then lost to Georgia. But I think they were back up to like number 3 or 4, and then South Carolina beat them. Yeah. And beat them convincingly. Then they go on the
63 to 38
35 or so 38, 35. Something like that. Yeah, it was insane. Yeah. Then they go back on the road the next week to Clemson, who's dominated them recently. I mean, not just beat them, but dominated them recently. Fall behind early, throw pick 6. I think you were down like 14-0 at one point. It was like 23-10 or 23-14. And they come storming back and end up winning that game. And never quit. Fell behind in that game early and battled. Because a team with less – I mean, it showed me something about Shane Beamer, to be honest with you, that he's got his team. They were just coming off in the week before Tennessee. Do you remember what happened the week before they played Tennessee, Ryan?
They had a clunker against someone.
They got curb stomped by Florida. I think it was like 38-6. I think is what the score was. Let me look up that score real quick. But it was a beat down. And the reality is, Ryan, yes, 38-6. They beat Vanderbilt the week before that, and then the week before that, they lost at home to Missouri. That team was on the verge of the past South Carolina teams under Will Muschamp. They fold. They lose their last 2 games. They finish 6-6 with no momentum, and they're playing in a bowl game and against an opponent nobody cares about. But that team showed me some intestinal fortitude, which comes from leadership at the top and then throughout the roster that, hey, guys, this is not okay. We're bouncing back, and we got Tennessee come to town, and we're going to take it to them. And they came out in that game, Ryan, fired up. And that said something to me about that coaching staff. And so came out, battled that game, big win. Then you say, okay, did they come in overconfident against Clemson? When they get punched in the mouth by Clemson and throw a pick 6, do they fold? No, they battled. So they're coming into this game hot and with a lot of confidence. Now, yes, they're losing players, but there's a lot coming back, just like Notre Dame's losing players. And I would argue that the loss of Isaiah Foskey and Michael Mayer is equal to the 6 or 7 guys that they've lost. I mean, with all due respect, Jaheim Bell and Austin Stogner losses, they're still not Michael Mayer, with all due respect, combined. So this is not going to be you're playing a depleted team, because you're a depleted team. You know what I mean? So big game, big moment, and sort of look at the expectations for this game, Ryan. What should they be? And so these predictions start coming out. Number 1, Notre Dame is a 2-point favorite, which means the odds makers see this as a very hotly contested game. South Carolina finished ranked ahead of Notre Dame in 2 of the 3 polls. So both 8-4 records, both are losing top players from this game. And so you're sitting in a situation where what separates these two teams? Well, ESPN and Sporting News both made predictions on what they think this game is going to be. They both predicted Notre Dame to lose and lose close games. The reason was, Ryan, quarterback. South Carolina has a red-hot quarterback coming into it. Notre Dame's starting quarterback for the last 10 games is gone. Tyler Buckner, who didn't play very well in his 2 starts, is now in. At first I was like, really? You guys are picking South Carolina to win, but then you read their analysis and it made a lot of sense. Like, I get it. As from an outsider point of view, I understand, Ryan,
right,
why they are looking at it the way they're looking at it. Because that's the one area right now there is a big, big gap is experience and production at quarterback.
Yeah, I have no quarrel with it. I really don't, because the other part of it is not only is Notre Dame now potentially starting Tyler Buckner again, who, like you said, didn't play very well before he got injured. He's also, again, if you kind of do your homework on him, he's also had a bunch of injuries, right? So it's like he also could be one play away from also not being in this football game, and then you're down to a true freshman quarterback at that point. So it's understandable. Like I don't really have any pushback on it. Like I mean, I personally think that Notre Dame has a very good opportunity to win this football game and can win convincingly if things go right. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a valid point. There is uncertainty at the most important position on the field for Notre Dame. And you don't have as much right now with South Carolina, because although Spencer Rattler wasn't very good early in the season, he's playing well right now, right? Like we always say, what matters most, what you did for me lately, right? And lately, Spencer Rattler's been pretty good. So,
and you know what else, Ryan? For all the crap he takes, and I've got my concerns and issues with Spencer Rattler, when he threw that pick 6 against Clemson, I tweeted, Clemson's about to run South Carolina out of this building.
Yeah.
Because that's the moment in the past where Spencer Rattler fades. He didn't. He came right back at him.
Yeah.
And so you have to ask yourself, did he finally turn the corner? That's a legitimate question.
Is he maturing? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get it. Now, what I want to discuss, Ryan, is that, yes, I understand it. I think Adam Rittenberg's analysis of why he predicted South Carolina, I don't agree with it. I'm going to predict Notre Dame to win when we do our predictions. I will. I still think Notre Dame has the better team top to bottom. I also have a little bit more faith in Tyler Buckner. And like I said, Tommy Rees has coached in 3 bowl games, and you can say a lot about Tommy Rees, and you can criticize him a lot of things. What you can't criticize him is his game plans coming into the 3 bowl games. Even against Alabama, they moved the ball early in that game. There was guys open in that game. Quarterback just didn't hit them. They ripped up Iowa State. I mean, ripped up Iowa State. A lot of people thought they were, couldn't get upset that game. Iowa State wasn't that good, but they're going to overlook them. And remember, there's the reports about how bad they were in practice and all that other kind of stuff. And they came out and just put that to bed early. And then last year, I mean, the game plan early last year, I mean, okay, halftime adjustments, whatever you want to talk about, but man, they came out against Oklahoma State and ripped Oklahoma State apart in that bowl game. So this has been one of those things where we can criticize certain things about Tommy Rees or whatever the case may be. But if you're going to tell me, well, he has, I don't think Tommy Rees can get them ready for a bowl game, I might answer based on what?
Right.
You know what I mean? Well, he didn't have Brian Kelly. He didn't have Brian Kelly last year getting ready for the Oklahoma State game either.
Against one of the best defenses in college football last year.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are the factors that make me think Notre Dame's going to win. But I also think that it is a matchup that's a good one. South Carolina will be a battle. It'll be a test. You're not just going to show up and roll the ball out and beat them like you did BC. This is a way better football team than that, right? So it makes it interesting, Ryan. But I think that the concern about quarterback is fair, as we discussed.
It's fair.
But what should the expectations be for this game, right? And that's kind of the thing that I first want to get into. Just overall, I think the expectation still should be, even without Michael Mayer and Isaiah Foskey, I think the expectation should still be that Notre Dame should be able to come out and win this game, because I still think top to bottom, and this is no slight on South Carolina. I mean, Shane Beamer's in year 2, y'all, like of taking over for a coach who got fired. Right now, Marcus Freeman's in year 1. But we're talking about year 2 in regards to building your roster the way you want your roster. And Marcus Freeman inherited a – go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and South Carolina lost a lot off that roster after right before Shane Beamer took over as the head coach as well. So there was turnover on that roster, on a roster that wasn't very good under Will Muschamp too. Obviously, the latter of his career there. So, I mean, just for some context, it was not a very good roster that Shane Beamer took over.
He has gotten talent out of guys that didn't show a lot. He's used the portal wisely, because here's the reality. There was risk taking Spencer Rattler, But that's the only way you're going to get a quarterback with that talent in the portal was by taking a kid that's got some red flags that other people are going to be afraid of.
Yep.
And they got the kid to play better and better and better as the year went on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's done a good job. But, obviously the Notre Dame roster and Marcus Freeman inherited was better. Now, it's not perfect by any stretch. And, there's some injuries and a couple guys, really important guys you lost. But I still think the expectation for Notre Dame should be that this is a game you're going to go into and win. I think that still needs to be absolutely the biggest expectation. I mean, we're kind of stating the obvious, Ryan, but I think it needs to be said that first of all, big picture, before we dive into the specifics as to why, that should still be the expectation. I get why, I respect why, because I respect Bill. He does a show with us. I love his opinion. And you know what I love about it too? I've never once told him, hey, Bill, you need to think this, you need to say this, you need to do this. Because I know he's going to give you honest analysis, just like he and I were joking about how he does his All-American list for Sporting News. He's like, well, I know I got one right, tight end. Well, he had Michael Mayer as the first team All-American at tight end, and so they debated that on their CFB Nation show, by the way, which came out today. So if you haven't listened to that yet, it's on the podcast app, CFB Nation, but they had a sort of an All-American debate, Hendon Hooker versus who was the other quarterback that he was debating that with? Let me look at the outline that he sent me, but I'm trying to remember what the quarterback debate was. It was Hendon Hooker against, this was yesterday's show, versus Max Dugan, as far as like Heisman and All-American debates. And then they debated Michael Mayer versus Brock Bowers, and Bill explained why he went with Mike Mayer there. So this is not an anti-Notre Dame guy at all. I understand, as someone who doesn't follow Notre Dame every single day like we do, why he would take South Carolina to win that game.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Same with Adam Rittenberg.
Yeah.
But I think I'd look at it differently, Ryan, and I believe you do too.
I do, because I just think there's a talent gap there. I mean, and we'll get into why that is, right, in certain instances. But I think the one thing that you said, Brian, that I agree with in a vacuum is that, yes, while maybe the 6 losses or whatever it is for South Carolina maybe equal the 2 that Notre Dame has, just because you're losing 2 stars with Notre Dame. The one thing, though, is that with losing so many bodies for South Carolina, for a roster that doesn't have the greatest depth in the world, losing that many guys, like, that's going to hurt you, right? And I think that when you talk about losing the talent they lost comparative to their entire roster level of talent, that's going to leave a gap. And I think there was already a gap. Even if they had all their dudes playing and Notre Dame had their guys playing, I think there's still a substantial gap between the talent level on both rosters. But I think when you talk about the players that they also lost that are, I mean, Cam Smith might go in the first round this year, the cornerback that opted out. Marshawn Lloyd was a top 100 caliber recruit coming out of high school.
And when healthy, a pretty good running back. When healthy.
Jaheim Bell was a very highly coveted player in the transfer portal before opting for Florida State. Like, they have some guys on there. Yes.
Do you mean that teams would covet a tight end who's so athletic you can move him to running back? I could see that, I guess. I could see that. Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Okay,
their defensive tackle, Zach Pickens, is going to be drafted probably in the top 100 picks in the draft this year. Like, they have some legit dudes that opted out, and the fact that you're losing depth for a roster that I think is still building depth up, I don't think it's great right now. I think you look at it just in a vacuum on paper and say, Notre Dame has a talent gap here, guys. Like, they do. Now the question is the positions that Notre Dame has question marks at, or matching up against the ones that South Carolina has question marks at, which one is more detrimental, I guess. But just from on a paper perspective, I think that it's pretty clear that Notre Dame has more talent from a roster perspective.
Right. So let's dive into that a little bit, Ryan. I think part of what we look at when we break this game down is, I think it's about matchups, right? A big part of college football is about matchups. And the question is, which of the matchup advantages will Notre Dame be able to exploit? Will the matchups that we saw during the season still play out against them with different rosters for both teams, right? Like, how's South Carolina? What thing they're not very good at? Running the football. You know what else they're not very good at? Stopping the run. And when they got beat this year, that was a big reason why. Was their inability to do one and inability to stop the other. And so I think that that's something that you look at, and obviously what was Notre Dame pretty good at this year? Well, we've talked about that. So, if you look at, we talked about their 2 losses in the regular season, at the end of the regular season. Here's what South Carolina did in their 4 losses: 29 carries for 40 yards rushing against Arkansas, 30 carries for 92 yards against Georgia, 23 carries for 32 yards against Missouri, 23 carries for 44 yards against Florida. And then in the games that they lost on offensively, actually, I'm sorry, those were their offensive numbers. Yes. And their defense in those games against Arkansas gave up 295 yards rushing on 65 carries, gave up 208 yards rushing on 35 carries to Georgia, gave up 143 yards and 2 touchdowns in 43 carries against Missouri. Okay. And then they gave up 374 yards and 54 attempts against Florida. And let's be real about something else. There's only one reason that they beat Clemson by a point. 1 point. And that reason is Clemson's starting quarterback went 8 of 29. That's why they lost. Their starting quarterback went 8 of 29 for 99 yards, right?
And still could have won the game. It's
yes.
wild.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not good. All right. That's not good at all. It's terrible. And so you look at that and say, well, what is Notre Dame good at? They're good at running the football. And at times this season, they've been pretty good at stopping the run. At other times, they're not.
Right.
And so that's reason number one for me. And then you take out Zach Pickens from that.
Yes.
That's, I mean,
who's your best player in the front 7 by far for South Carolina. No, not even a debate.
Right. So those are the things you look at, Ryan, and say that's where, for me, this matchup starts. Is I look at the trench battles, and I think that's the first area you look at and say, boy, I really, even without Foskey, I really like that part of this matchup for Notre Dame. Yeah. Is they're playing a team that can't run, because there's this in USC. USC couldn't stop the run, but they could run. They were a good running football team, averaging over 180 yards coming into that game. South Carolina's like 123 coming into this game. And when you look at the numbers too, Ryan, that 123 gets inflated by the fact they ran for 295 against Charlotte, 185 against South Carolina State, and 208 against Vanderbilt. Right? I mean, they had 6 games this year where they were under 100 yards.
Oof.
And another game with 118. So
and you don't have your best running back who was averaging like 5.2 a carry.
Right.
Like it's I mean, because their leading rusher now is the McDowell kid, right? That has like sub 200 yards on the season. Right. So
now they do have the Christian Beal kid. I don't know if he's healthy. I'd have to go look into that. If there's a South Carolina fan listening, let us know, because I know he didn't play a full season this year. That's the kid that transferred in from Wake Forest.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious if he's healthy, because he didn't play a ton, and I don't know if that's because he was just buried on the depth chart, if he was injured. I haven't got that in depth to this specific matchup of their third string running back just yet. We'll get there. All right, we'll get there.
You haven't done that yet? Are you creative?
Yes. Yes. So that's kind of what when I look at it, that's a big part of how I see this going.
And on the other side of it too, Brian, I mean, as of right now, we haven't heard any different that Jared Patterson's not going to play, right? So you haven't heard that he's going to not play, so we're going to assume that he is as of right now. So you could legitimately have your starting 5 up front offensively against a not great run defense that has a NFL level defensive tackle, run stopper that is not going to be playing in this football game as well. So if you're talking about a clear advantage, Notre Dame's offensive line and run game should have a clear advantage against this South Carolina front 7, because they just don't have a ton of talent up there, man. Like, they got Jordan Birch, who I know was a pretty high recruit, but he hasn't really materialized. Like, their only player that's really played at a high level this year is Zach Pickens. And with him not in this football game, should be tough for them to stop the run. Again, that's on paper, but that's all we can go off of right now is what's on paper.
I think there's another part of this too, Ryan, is what is South Carolina good at? What are the things that they were good at this year? Well, they weren't great at rushing the football, but you know what they were pretty good at? Throwing the football at times. Sure. The other thing that they were pretty good at this year is, I think I might have misspoke on this yesterday, but remember when you and I did that prediction show before the Tennessee-South Carolina game, and I said, I got my eye on this game. One of the reasons why is because I really liked South Carolina's secondary. Their results aren't always great, but I like the talent in the secondary. And I thought that the matchup against Tennessee, I thought that they could slow them down enough. Now, I did not see that I thought maybe they could pick a couple balls off and maybe win 38-35 because I don't have a lot of faith in Tennessee's defense. But, I mean, I didn't see them win in the way they did. But I really thought they could make enough disruptive plays in the secondary against the Tennessee receiving core and Hendon Hooker to stay in that game because I thought they could score a little bit on Tennessee. That was really it. I mean, I think they've got a really athletic secondary that has been productive. And there's some depth there too, Ryan. Like if they're down a kid, there's some kid. That's an area where I think he's recruited well early on, but that's one area where I thought he inherited a pretty decent situation was secondary talent. So that's the other part of this. And so that's when you say, okay, well, what matchups concern you? That's one right there. Is they're pretty good. They're pretty good when it comes to stopping the pass. They're not great at getting after the quarterback, which makes it says a lot about the secondary that they could be as good as they are. Because Ryan, here's a crazy number for you. They had this year 18 sacks on the season. They had the number 27 pass defense in the country. They had the number. See here, where are they at here? 26 pass defense in the country from an efficiency standpoint. Only allowed 6.5 yards per pass attempt, which ties for 29th in the country. One spot ahead of Notre Dame. Notre Dame's 35th, but it's literally a bunch of people tied at 29, then a bunch of people tied at 35, right? 6.5 for South Carolina, 6.6 for Notre Dame. We've talked about this. That's the opposite side. Notre Dame has a very good pass defense. We expect it to be healthier than it was against USC, not all the way back. But that's the question that's the one matchup in this game, Ryan, that I think for Notre Dame should give you a little bit of pause is Notre Dame's pass offense against South Carolina's pass defense. It's a very good pass defense. Notre Dame's pass offense has been a bit of a struggle, and now you're asking a quarterback who hasn't played in 2 months to step in without your best pass game weapon. I think that would be the one area where you look at expectations. You're going to have to do well in an area you haven't done well all season if you're going to win, because I don't see this being a 17-14 game. I think the defense can play well against South Carolina, but I don't see them holding them to 6, 10, 13, 14 points. I mean, maybe 20, 27 potentially, but not 7, 10 in my opinion. And if they do, Al Golden's going to be hearing some praises from us because this is a good offense in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's one thing that even under Will Muschamp in the later years, I think that one thing that South Carolina's always had is they have had talent in the secondary. I mean, if you go back to like the J.C. Horn, Israel McQuamu, and then they had the kid that's at what's the kid's name that's at Florida State now, the safety Robinson. I forgot his first name, but he's a good football player.
Jamie,
as well.
Right?
Jamie Robinson, who's now with Florida State. They've had talent in the secondary, and then, like I said, they have Cam Smith that opted out of the game to prepare for the NFL draft, but he's a talented kid. Yeah. But to your point, they have some other guys that are in the wings.
Right.
They have a freshman safety that I think was their leading tackler this year that is a Kyle Hamilton clone. He's like 6'4", 220 pounds. That they play working from depth a lot, which is pretty wild. So, yeah, they have some
Good
talent
luck
out there.
That's not a name. Eamon Worry.
I know he's number 24. Right? That's all I know.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is they do a nice job. There's a lot of athletes in South Carolina. What the state of South Carolina doesn't produce a ton of is linemen.
Yeah.
But they produce a lot of athletes. And then they're right there by Georgia and Florida. And they get a lot of those 3-star kids that a lot of people didn't recruit. They get some North Carolina kids. And to your point, Ryan, this isn't like an anomaly with them when it comes to talent secondary. I know you were very high on.
Horn was a Georgia guy.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to say. You were very high on him coming out of the draft. Didn't you have him as the top cornerback in that draft class? And he's played pretty well so far, correct?
He should make the Pro Bowl this year. Okay. So he's been very good. Very good. Right. He got hurt. He got hurt during his rookie year, and then this year he's been very good. That corner class 2 years ago, man, with him and Patrick Surtain Jr. at the top was very good. Very good. But I mean they've always had talent in the secondary, man. Like there's no doubt, and they still have talent even with Cam Smith out. So I think it's good that Tyler Buckner in this passing game, now with Tobias Merriweather back from injury, has these 15 practices to get ready and to get back on the same page. But we talked about this yesterday. live bullets are a lot different, right? Game time's a lot different. So they're going to have to be ready to play because they're going to get challenged in their passing game. No doubt about that.
Well, in South Carolina, they don't get after the quarterback very well, and they know it. And so they do a lot of things schematically, Ryan, which we'll break down as we get closer to the game that are going to things that try to create problems with the quarterback. That's why they produce so many interceptions is their DBs are – this is a concern I have when you're looking at Tyler Buchner. Their defensive backs are pretty good at baiting quarterbacks into perimeter throws. Would you agree with that? Like Marshall 100%. Was, and then they finally got Tyler, late in the game on one of those. Almost got him again earlier in the game. Yeah. But that's something I think the South Carolina kids do a really good job of as well. And Notre Dame's going to have to be prepared for that, in my opinion.
They're all long and pesky, man. They're going to be – that's a good comparison against the Marshall game, Brian, right? Like you have Stephen Gilmore and Micah Abraham who were both long and they were both super aggressive, right? Like they were going to stay in phase. They were stay in your hip pocket and they were going to break on everything short. And South Carolina has a lot of confidence in what they have in the secondary. So these guys are not going to be playing 8 yards, 10 yards off, right? Like they're going to be in your face and they're going to dare you to take chances. And Notre Dame, from there, it's going to be Notre Dame to it's going to be up to Notre Dame to capitalize if they can to make some big plays in the passing game. Will they be able to? That's a big question mark. And that's definitely a spot where I think South Carolina is going to feel pretty good about coming into the football game.
Right. They're going to do what everybody else did, Ryan. They're going to come into that game and they're going to beat the receivers up at the line of scrimmage. Right. Say, hey, you're gonna have to beat me up. You're gonna have to beat me down the field. You're gonna have to, get off the line. You're gonna have to get into your routes. You're gonna have to. We're not gonna let you throw a quick game. We're not gonna let you get the ball in space easily to your W or your Z or your X. You're gonna have to throw the ball down the field. Now that doesn't mean Notre Dame can't design some things to get the ball quickly to the perimeter. They can and they should. Right. And there are times where you can get those little quick 5-6 yard gains into the boundary. They will play some off coverage into the boundary at times where you can. Just knock a little quick on that. The thing I like about what they do, though, is they'll disguise that, though. They won't just play 9 yards off and open up and bail. They'll play on and then bail at the snap, which requires a quarterback to make really quick, hey, look, the window's open, but that guy's pressed at the snap. You see that guy bail. I'm taking that sucker, bam, we're checking it down on the hitch route, or we're hitting the stop route, or whatever the case may be. And knowing that you can hit those routes. But you're asking a quarterback who doesn't have a lot of experience throwing the football in college to make those decisions. That's where the matchup can get problematic. And as you said, we know that Tyler Buchner can physically do that. We've seen him make those quick decisions in practice, and we actually saw him make those decisions last year. We just didn't see him make them this year a whole lot. And so that's going to be the key, is Tyler's going to have to be a good decision maker. But again, Tommy Rees that's why I'm really fascinated by this matchup, Ryan, because I really don't know what we're going to see from Notre Dame offensively, schematically and personnel-wise. I hope that we're going to see what we talked about in our show a couple days ago, but I don't know. But if we do, here's the thing, I'll say this. Part of why I didn't think the game, the offense during the season was necessarily as good as it should have been is because I don't really think, I believe two things. I think Tom Rees is a guy that wants to run the football. I do. I don't think Tom Rees is a guy that wants to come out in 13 personnel and run it the way that they did this year. I think he's a guy that wants to have a balanced attack. I think he's a guy that wants to be able to throw the ball for 275 and run for 225. That's what I think Tom Rees, and have a pass game that's really efficient, a lot like what we saw late last year. That, to me, is where I think Tommy Rees wants to be. I don't think he is the guy we saw this year. I don't think he's the guy we saw in the bowl game who's going to throw it 68 times. I don't think that's what he wants to do. That was out of necessity because they were getting their butts kicked in the trenches in the run game last year. Yeah. And so I think he's a guy that does want to be able to use 11 personnel. I think he's a guy that wants to be able to use 21 at times if he feels he's got the quarterback to do that. And you don't have Michael Mayer to build your game plan around this year like you had early in the season. So I think that's part of it too is, I think I'm a pretty smart football guy. I've been a pass game coordinator and things like that in my career. But you put me in a triple option offense, and I'm not game planning that as well as I could. And I've coached in a triple option offense, right? So it took me a while to kind of get comfortable with that and say, okay, but even the ins and outs are I couldn't know it like the dudes that were in it, right? And so when you're not doing necessarily what you truly ultimately want to be, you're not going to do it quite as well as you do. That's why I'm really excited to see this bowl game, because I think what we could see in this game is more of who I think ultimately Tommy Rees wants to be. mixing up personnel, 12-1 series, 21 the next, 11 the next, coming out on one series, just messing with you to go 13 personnel just to mess with you. And then the very next play, spread the field and throw the football. I think that's who he wants to be, Ryan.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to make this interesting because out of that, you can get a lot more creative with your receiver and running back alignments. And that long tangent was to get here. Okay, sorry. Those are the things you can do to get your receivers free easier than in 12 and 13 where they're just kind of on an island and all you can really do is a motion them across. You can stack. You can do quick little zip motions to stack a guy behind off of a motion as opposed to just lining up that way. You can motion to a stack. You can do bunch and then boom, do a shift or thing. I mean, there's so much more you can do when you have more athletes on the field pre-snap, which can then create a team like South Carolina who likes to do a lot of different things coverage structure-wise can give them some problems because now you're snapping the ball as their mid-communication point, mid-checkpoint. And that's what he was able to do to Oklahoma State a little bit last year is a lot of motions and shifts and things like that, going empty one play, 12 the next, doing a lot of things like that, and it gave them problems. And that's where I think Tom Reese is at his best, in my opinion. That's what we saw against Florida State last year. That's what we saw in the last 6 games of the year. That's what we saw in 2019 in the bowl game. And that's what we saw, and we said this, late in the year in 2020, Notre Dame's pass offense was starting to roll before they had the multiple offensive line injuries. Because remember, Tommy Kramer got hurt. Tommy Kramer got hurt 2020. Then Josh Lugg got hurt, and Jarrett Patterson got hurt. Zeke Correll comes in. He gets hurt. Josh Lugg is now back. He's got to move to center. Like their offensive line was a mess late in the season. And that's when the offense sputtered again. But coming into that game, that offense was starting to heat up a little bit. And again, why? They were balanced, right? They were efficient throwing the football. They weren't throwing it a ton, 39 against Clemson, but that was partly overtime and that they needed to do that. Took some shots out of the field, but 28 against Boston College, 33 against North Carolina, 26 against Georgia Tech, 33 against Pitt for a bunch of yards. I mean, you're starting to the last 5 games of the regular season, they went 3-19, 119 against Georgia Tech. You had a couple drops, but you jumped on them kind of early and went to the run game. 310 against Clemson, 283 against Boston College, 279 against North Carolina, 285 against Syracuse. And as we mentioned the other day when we read those stats, you had like 3 or 4 just pure drop balls in that game because of the sun. For whatever reason that day was jacking up with the receivers. Joe Wilkins dropped one in the sun. Javon McKinley dropped one in the sun, and there was one more drop in the sun that game. Otherwise, he's over 3 bills that game again. So we've seen this from Tommy. And so that's why I think with the personnel that they are, that's why we did the show we did the other day. I truly believe we're going to see that, Ryan. And we need to see it because that's the way you can get guys free against South Carolina, in my opinion, is that type of stuff.
Well, and also they're going to load up against the run. They know they can't stop the run very well, right? So there's going to be a lot of situations where Notre Dame's in one-on-one situations just to begin with, right? They're going to trust their guys to play your guys. And especially if you're able to create some of those free releases, whether it is by stacking or the short motions or whatever it is, I think that one thing that Tommy Reese has unquestionably done is that he does have creativity in the passing game to scheme some guys open, right? Like he can get those free releases. He can. And I think you're going to need to do that because I think especially early in the football game, they're going to load up to stop the run. They know they're not good at it. They're going to put extra numbers in the box, and you're going to have to create some opportunities in the passing game. Take opportunities in the passing game, free it up a little bit, and then that's when Audric Estime, Logan Diggs, and the rest of the boys start to wear you down in that football game. I really think this might be a game where the pass game sets up the run a little bit. Like I think that this one is one where you might want to try to loosen things up a little bit, get the guy out of the box and make them respect the passing game and to be able to scheme open some guys. So I actually think that's let's run the football to set up the pass game more. But in this game, this one might be one where you say they're not going to respect your passing game. They have a pretty good secondary. Let's get create some plays on them, and then let the guys run down on them once they lighten that box a little bit when you're able to create some explosive plays.
I think the other part of this matchup too, Ryan, is on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame's had a really good pass defense all season for most of the season. There's been a couple games here and there, but even the USC game, like they got a couple plays, but Caleb Williams was not ripping them up throwing the football. They had like 3 or 4 really big plays, and like you had the early 3rd and 1, or was it 4th and 1? Was it 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 where the tight end leaked out, got free? So the 3rd and 1.
I think it was 3rd, yeah.
Okay.
I think it was 3rd, yeah.
You had a couple of those plays, a couple missed tackles, but like he wasn't out there just shredding the Notre Dame defense and throwing the football.
I mean, they were playing so much. They were playing such good pass coverage that most of the plays that he made in the passing game were him just extending the ball for so long and guys breaking open late. Like it wasn't.
Oh, you're
pass
right.
Coverage.
You're right, and there's a lot of clips if you go watch all 22. There's a lot of plays of Jaden Mickey being pretty solid in coverage, right? It's just then there's the a lot of times when you're watching on TV, you only see the ones where he gets beat, right?
Right.
We saw
like the 3rd and 5 out route or whatever it was. Like, yeah.
Right. So those are the things, Ryan, to me. But now here's the deal, though. You're not going to have Cam Hart in the game. Okay. You've played a game without him. You're going to be in a situation where you've got a month to prepare for life without him. But it's still, you can be prepared for it, but you're still not going to be as good as you would have been if he's in the game, right? You don't have Isaiah Foskey, your best pass rusher. That's what we know for sure now. Those are 2 big pieces to a pass offense against what for South Carolina is a very good pass offense when it's on. That is the one thing I will say about the South Carolina pass game, Ryan. And I'm curious if you agree or disagree with this. Mm-hmm. But the numbers they put up this year on the whole were impressive at times. I mean, we talk about how 453 yards against Tennessee, 360 against Clemson, 284 against Vanderbilt, 377 against Arkansas. But then there's 177 against Kentucky, 168 against Texas A&M, 171 in a loss against Missouri, 193 in a loss against Florida. It was very inconsistent pass game, but when it's on, it's really good. Here's another stat for you. The offense threw 10 interceptions in the first 6 games. Only threw 3 in the last 6. So it got a little better protecting the football. So when this pass game is on, Ryan, it's really good. What can Notre Dame do to slow down that pass game? That's going to be the question. But what I want to ask you about, and we'll get into some specifics, is how do you see Notre Dame matching up personnel-wise on the perimeter with who they have coming back? Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey, Tariq Bracy, and Clarence Lewis and the safeties. That's another part to me that you have to look at as interest. Like, okay, is Notre Dame's defense going to look like? Because what do we know about Tennessee? Their pass defense sucks. What do you know about Clemson? Their pass defense sucks. It's true all year. Notre Dame's does not suck, but it's not the group that it was for 12 games that didn't suck, right?
Sure.
It's going to have less.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's going to be, that's going to be an interesting part.
I would say this, right? Like coming into the year, I mean, I think most people assume that Josh Vann would be the best wide receiver for South Carolina, right? And I mean, he dealt with some injuries and now he's expected to miss this football game as well. But even without him, I would say the one thing that South Carolina has at wide receiver, in my opinion, is they have some speed at the position, right? And that's one thing that I'm interested to see how Jaden Mickey plays in this game. I am, because he's the one guy that if his eyes aren't right or he goes for a little head fake or whatever it is, he's the guy that can give up a big play, right? So I think that you need to counteract this speed. I mean, from a talent perspective, I think Notre Dame matches up well, like Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey, Clarence Lewis, whoever else in the secondary, like that. You guys you have a more than enough athleticism and talent to counteract this team. And I think the one interesting thing as well, Brian, for me, is that I think there's going to be a lot of attention for Al Golden to stop the perimeter passing game because you don't have those 2 tight ends that we talked about, right? You don't have Jaheim Bell. You don't have Austin Stockner. So there's not a huge middle of the field threats that South Carolina is going to boast in this football game. So now let's say the perimeter passing game is where it gives you the most trouble, right? And so you're going to need to find ways to be aggressive on the outside with also maintaining good discipline, in my opinion. But I really think that for me, it starts up front. It really does. Like we've talked about it a ton yesterday. If you get pressure on Spencer Rattler, he's going to make some bad decisions, right? Whether it's an errant throw or a bad decision or, throwing off his back foot and not quite getting enough on a football. Like he has a propensity to do those things. So I think that you have to be able to match up against speed against South Carolina. You need to understand that they have a lot of talent, but more than anything, I think it starts with the trigger man. I think it starts with Spencer Rattler. You have to get after him because even without Isaiah Foskey against this offensive line that isn't very good at protecting the football in general, of playing against a quarterback that also doesn't manage pressure very well and manage chaos very well, right. I still think Notre Dame has an opportunity to get after Spencer Rattler and force him into some bad decisions.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big key. That's going to be a big key in this game is when Spencer Rattler is comfortable, he's really good. And we gave the numbers. I'm not going to repeat them from yesterday.
Yeah,
we gave the numbers. So can Notre Dame, do we see a breakout from someone that gets us excited about next year?
I hope it's Jade Mickey, man. I hope it's Jade Mickey.
Well, I mean, from a pass rushing standpoint, right? That's right. So do we see a Jordan Patelho situation? Do we see a Josh Burnham breakout? Does Justin Adamiola be like, hey, now that I'm just a Viper, I'm going to have like 8 pressures in I don't know. Does Howard Cross be like, hey, now's my turn? Does Riley Mills have the break? I don't know who that's going to be. Like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah had a really good 2019 season, but he really broke out in the bowl game and then vaulted himself into a great next year. Right now, does that happen with J.D. Bertrand as a pass? Does Notre Dame finally find a role that Maris Luafau can get comfortable in and be good at? Those are all. Is Jalen Sneed, Prince Colley? There's so many options. Does somebody step up and become that guy? I think that's going to be a big part of this too, Ryan, because I don't want it to have to be where Al Golden has to scheme their way into success in this matchup. That's the thing I don't – now, if you can, great, but eventually, Ryan, you can't do that for 65 snaps a game. At some point, somebody's got to step up and say, I got this.
Well, it's a great point too, because coming into this season, just in general, you knew Isaiah Foskey was going to be a dude for you, right? You knew that as long as Cam Hart took a step forward and, he dealt with some injuries, obviously, throughout the season, but you thought Cam Hart could be a dude for you. And you thought that Jason Amalola could be another guy that maybe could be a dude for you. A very good player, if not a dude, potentially. Going into next season right now, as it stands, you know that Benjamin Morrison's going to be a dude, right? You think Cam Hart, again, if he's healthy, could be a dude. But is there a dude up front right now? Like, do you have one? I don't know if you have one. You have a bunch of good players. Like, there's no doubt. Howard Cross is a good player. Justin Adamalola, if he comes back, is a good player. Riley Mills is a good player. But can any of them make that ascension to being the dude, that guy, right? Where you go into next season, you're like, on a big third down, Riley Mills is our dude, right? Like, that's the guy that's going to make a play. You don't have that answer right now. But I think it's important that you find that out, right? Because we talk about momentum for the team this offseason. That also can be tremendous momentum for Jordan Vitello or Riley Mills or Justin Adamalola or Howard Cross or whoever it is. And it doesn't have to be just, you don't have to have 11 and a half sacks next year like an Isaiah Foskey had this year. But in the big moments, who's the guy you can depend on? And I think that this is an opportunity for somebody to step up and show that they can be that guy.
End of the day, Ryan, it's like it's not even necessarily a guy that's an incredibly highly productive guy, right? Like the 2018, 2019 defensive lines had Julian Okwara, who was the big pass rusher. He was the sack guy. But you go to almost outside of the Virginia game in 2019, if you go to almost every big sack that Notre Dame had in 2018 and 2019, almost every single big one, clutch game on the line sack was Khalid Kareem, right? Michigan late. It was Pitt late. It was he was that clutch guy, kind of like Foskey was in 2020. And so those are things that you look at and say, even if it's not a guy that just has 9 pressures, if it's a guy that has 3 pressures, but they're on a key 3rd and 4, a key 1st and 10 that stops a drive where your offense just gave you a 3-point lead, you need a big play, somebody gets a first down sack, that kind of thing. Then all of a sudden you force a punt and then your offense goes down and score. And all of a sudden a 3-point game turns into a 10-point game. Where did it start? That big sack on first down. Now that guy didn't have a great game, but man, that sack was money. And that's what Khalid Kareem was at Notre Dame. He was one of the most clutch pass rushers that I've seen in the last decade. And the only guy that's right above him, in my opinion, is Foskey. As far as just clutch, like when you needed a guy to make a pass rush in a big moment, it was Foskey. right? And that's how Khalid was. And it could even be something like that where a guy has one pressure all game, but it's just a money situation. They go right down the field. Like I think of the sack that Foskey had against USC, right? USC was driving last year, 2020 or 2021. USC's driving. They get in the red zone. He comes around as a big strip sack. Keaton Slovis just completely stalled their drive. I think he ended up settling for a field goal on that drive.
He got him back in the Cincinnati game last year as well with that big strip sack.
Bingo. That's a great point. They're down 17-0 and Cincinnati's driving. And Ahrensberger puts his hands up. Foskey comes around the edge, hits it, strips it, kept them in the Oklahoma State game. Oklahoma State's about to put that game away in the fourth quarter. Isaiah's it wasn't a sack, I don't think. It was a scramble, but he comes up and he knocks the ball out. Either of the running back or quarterback. Was it Sanders that he knocked it out of, or was it a run play?
I'm pretty sure
I thought it was a scramble.
Yeah.
And so will it be who will be that clutch guy? Who will be that guy that, and this is something we didn't see all year, Ryan. And this is something we didn't talk about yesterday that I'm very curious to see if somebody emerges in that role this game. What we didn't see on defense is that past defenses has had. It was either it was a Wusu Koromoa or it was Khalid Kareem or Dalen Hayes or Adio Gandiji or Lohi Gilman or Julian Love or guys like that. There was always that guy, that group of players that when the game needed to be won and a play needed to be made, for example, like, I don't know, your offense just went up 15-12 and your team and you defensively have a team backed up 3rd and 9 inside their own 10-yard line. Like, hypothetically or directly this Marshall game, who steps up and makes that play? Your offense has been struggling all game. They finally put a drive together. They get a touchdown to put you up 14-13. Who makes the play that then goes and we say, well, hey, look, they did strip Tanner McKee. The refs made a bad call. Cool. But that was still in their own territory. There's a lot of other chances for plays to be made on that series, and nobody stepped up to make it. I think of Alohi Gilman stripping Jared Pinkney at the goal line in 2018 against Vanderbilt, right? You always had that money player. Who is going to be that guy in this game that then starts to take over that role next year? That's stuff that's expectations that I want to see from this bowl game as well, Ryan.
Did you see Gilman he started this past game for the Chargers, which was awesome to see, man. He was that money player. But I mean, I agree completely, man. Bowl games are interesting things at times, right? Because they feel very separate from the season a lot, especially when you are dealing with some opt-outs, with some transfer portal guys, all those different types of things. But there's still a massive opportunity for players to set the table for themselves for the next season. And I think that, again, I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know if it's Riley Mills. I don't know if it's Howard Cross. I don't know if it's Gabriel Rubio. Like, I don't know who that guy is that makes that big play when you need it most. But I have to think, but judging by how everyone's kind of picking this game so far, whether it's Sporting News or ESPN, a lot of people think it's going to be a close game, right? So when it's a close game, those moments matter so much, in those big-time moments, those pressure-packed situations. So, I'm sure we'll pick who the breakout stars of the bowl game are going to be, but regardless, Notre Dame's going to need it. It's going to need it probably at some point in this football game.
That's the expectation, right? That's what we talk about. What are expectations for this game? It's what bowl games can have too much made of them at times, but I also think they can be too easily dismissed at times.
That's true.
And one thing Adam Rittenberg wrote in his article at ESPN was, this is a fairly important game for Notre Dame. I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. I think this is a game that is like the bowl game against Iowa State 3 years ago. It didn't matter a whole lot to me. It really didn't. Like, okay, they're 7 weren't they like 7-5 and Notre Dame was like 10-2 and
something like that,
and it's just like, dude, this is a mismatch. Now, their defense was pretty decent that year at times and all that, but it's like, if Notre Dame doesn't dominate this game, there's a problem. No, they did what they needed to do and they went and dominated and all that. And it was good to see that, right? You get rewarded for doing what you're supposed to do. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Sure.
But like, this is a different scenario. Relatively evenly matched game on paper and rankings wise, and also just from a momentum standpoint. Those are things that I think that we'll need to see. That's what I'm looking at, Ryan, for this game.
I love it, and especially when you don't have guys like Michael Mayer and Isaiah Foskey, who are your guys, right? Like, who's the next wave? I mean, we talk about it all the time, right? Who's the next money player? Who's the next star? You have opportunity to see that,
right.
And you have guys that
on
are
both sides, really, too. right?
Yes.
I mean, we're
Absolutely.
focused on defense right now, but the same thing is true on offense, right? Who steps up as that playmaker in the pass game on 3rd and 4? That was
Right.
always Michael Mayer, right?
And Deion Colsey started to show that it was a little bit of him later in the
On
season.
3rd and long, sure.
Exactly. So, but can he parlay that now into increased opportunities on 3rd downs? Right. So that's what I'm looking for.
Can Tobias? Okay, I'm gonna say this like a normal person. Can Tobias Merriweather? Can he go out there? No. Can Tobias go out there and look, didn't have a ton of experience during the season, but have that sort of bowl game breakout? We've seen that before from guys, right?
Sure.
Is it going to be Deion? My perfect world, both of them.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can they get Lorenzo? Is this a Lorenzo Styles game? Is this a game we finally get him going? Does Jaden Tom? And here's the guy that I got my eye on.
Mm-hmm.
The guy conversation to me, that's Deion, that's Tobias, possibly Lorenzo. He's got to get his head on right, but the talent was there. It's what we talked about during the offseason. Yep. I don't ever see Jaden Thomas being the guy, but I see Jaden Thomas being a bigger, thicker Avery Davis, meaning leadership and all that. But Avery Davis never put up monster numbers, but you could almost trace every play he made and be like, that was clutch. That was 3rd and 5. That was 3rd and 10. Yeah. That was a late 4th quarter play, right? Like it was always that. Like if you go look at his numbers against South Carolina or against Clemson in 2020, remember that, Ryan? Like he didn't catch a mess of balls that game.
No,
he just caught balls that were important. Like I think let me pull this up. What did he end with that game? He had against Clemson, he had 4 catches for 78 yards, right? 3 of them off the top of my head I can remember. He had a huge sideline catch, I think on a 3rd or 4th down to move the chains. He had the big long pass to set up after they had just fallen behind. In that game, Clemson had finally taken a lead in that game. And then he comes back and makes that great catch, but that wasn't it. The biggest play he made that game was the 3rd down touchdown pass he got, where he was working one way, it was covered, so he broke quickly back into a hole, gave Ian Book room to throw that pass to tie the game. If you don't do that, then the big long play that everybody remembers doesn't matter. So that's 3 of his 4 catches right there. 4 catches, 78 yards. That's not a monster game, but they don't win that game without those 3 catches, right? That's how Avery was. I think he had like 1 catch against Duke in 2020. 2 catches for 26 yards. One of them was a 3rd and long that went for a touchdown. If you're on a great back shoulder catch up the seam, that's how Avery was, and that's how I see Jaden Thomas. If they're using him more as a slot guy, which is what I think they should do, I think he could be that guy that says who takes Michael Mayer's reps, who takes not reps but like routes, who's that situational money player. I could see it being Jaden Thomas, but can he? It's one thing to be that guy when you've got Mayer over there. It's another thing when you're that guy that
people know you're that guy.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm curious to see in this game.
Yeah. And look, man, there's a lot of excitement about these wide receivers. There is. I mean, how long have we been talking about Deion Colsey and Tobias Merriweather, Brian, right? Like we've been waiting for that breakout game for them together. So they'll have opportunities. Jaden Thomas will have opportunities. I hope Lorenzo Styles has a big game. I hope Holden Stays gets a lot of touches. I hope that Mitchell Evans gets a couple opportunities in the passing game as well. So there's a lot of talent at the receiver position in the pass game just in general. The question is, who are those guys going to be? Who are your dudes? There's a lot of talent, but there's a big difference between being a talented player who can play a role and being a talented player who is the guy. Those are big difference. So there's going to be a lot of options, but I'm hopeful that there's going to be at least a couple players that are able to take that opportunity and really rise with it going into the offseason.
Brian, we kind of get into some predictions and all that other kind of stuff. Something I'm curious to kind of see is from this game is how the running back group is used in this game.
Right.
If they do go away more from 12, if they go away from 12 personnel more, what would be that type of like how do you think that impacts how they use the running backs in this game? Because we've seen them. Like, does it look more like North Carolina and Cal, where like all 3 were being used, or do you think it looks more like later in the season where it's it was Logan and Audric, and then they would eventually ride the hot hand and grind it out.
I mean, I'm always going to be hopeful that they're going to use all three and that they're going to use a ton more 21 personnel to try to get something in the passing game. Because, I mean, one thing we talked about is with Michael Mayer out, you have to supplement a lot of targets, obviously, and a lot of opportunities. And, yeah, the immediate conversation is going to be the other tight ends in the room. Then it's going to turn to the other wide receivers in the room. But I think that you've seen, when used properly, whether it is as a legitimate player in the passing game on an angle route or a wheel route or just a check down, Notre Dame has some guys that can make plays in the passing game. I mean, we remember what Chris Tyree did last year in the bowl game. We know with the weapon that he can be in the passing game when utilized. We remember Logan Diggs against North Carolina in a couple games this season where you're like, okay, he used on a wheel route, for instance, and getting him out of the backfield. Audric Estime is averaging like 16 yards a catch or something like that, because all he catches is just like angle routes that he takes for big gains. So, I mean, to your question, Brian, I think that Notre Dame's offense is going to have to play less heavy personnel, and they're going to have to utilize running backs in the passing game a lot more than they have over the last few games, because I think without Michael Mayer, you're going to have to supplement those touches. And I think that you've seen when Tyree, Logan Diggs, or Audric Estime get opportunities in the passing game, they have the skill set to make those types of plays. And we didn't even talk about the second level of South Carolina's defense much because of obvious reasons, right? But I think that you can also create a lot of mismatches there in the passing game. And there's going to be a lot of man coverage, I would assume, early on in this football game. You know, what's a fan favorite as far as playing some cover one or cover zero is a nice little halfback angle out of the backfield, right? Against zero. Like that's a fan favorite, man. So I think that you have the opportunity to really supplement some of those touches in the passing game with the running backs, because all three have shown in their own way, if you use them properly in the passing game, they can all be weapons. So I really do think that you need to use all three effectively in this one.
Yeah. I think that's when the offenses really clicked this year, is when, like the Clemson game, for example, we didn't see a lot of touches for Chris Tyree, but they were perimeter touches that I thought softened Clemson up. Just when Clemson was starting to really load the box, and it'd come out and say, bam. Because that was the one thing we said about that game. That was probably Tommy Rees's best game of the season, because he was just constantly one step ahead. Now, it wasn't the most productive. I mean, he only scored really 21 offensive points. I mean, technically 28. It's really only 14 on just drives, right? Part of that's because you had a blocked punt that took a possession away, a pick six that took a possession away. But the thing I loved about that game plan, Ryan, is he was constantly one step ahead of the cat from Clemson. It's like he always was ready for his answer. Yeah. You know, you start loading the box. Hey, let's go 21 and get Chris Tyree out there and throw a couple little nows, and we're just stealing yards from you. Like, I'm like, that stuff I want to see all the time. You know, but like those are things that I think can be impactful too. You know, get some of that cover one stuff, really emphasize against cover one, because they'll play other stuff. They'll play some quarters. They'll play some other things, right? They'll mix up their coverages. But when you get those man frees, Tyler, you got to identify this as man free. You got to see, we're running this route. If you hit your third step and it's not there, you're not running. You're not going to it's okay. If they're all dropping, that means nobody's covering Audric or Logan or Chris Tyree on the check swing. Yeah. Flip that sucker out there, buddy. Right? Those are the stealing yards things that I think that I'd like to see more of from this offense that was not as easy to get to when you're in 12 and 13 personnel and it's all condensed. But there were still plenty of shots there. I mean, it was there. And that's kind of, you know, like a lot of teams, Ryan, they'll do the angle stuff you talked about, and they'll check the backs and just check them right from the quarterback. Yeah. One thing that I liked that Notre Dame did a lot of this year, which I'm kind of more of a fan of, I like designed running back routes over the middle. I like my checks to go wide. And I think that that's what we saw a lot from them this year, is getting those checks outside the box where I can just dump it off and he can be in space, as opposed to having to catch a ball. Because, like, if I'm throwing a check wide, more often than not, if the ball's thrown correctly, he's catching it squared. Mm-hmm. If I'm dumping a ball off on a guy who's basically just kind of optioned behind the line, he's got to catch, turn, find the defense, and go. That's why I've always been a fan of the perimeter checks. You know, check, swing. You know, and those are the things that have worked for Notre Dame a couple times this year, but they've been open a lot. Those are things that against quarters and cover one, which is two of the primary coverages that South Carolina runs, are both great. check, release things against a team that's not great at rushing the quarterback.
Yep.
So those are other parts of it. But where's that going to? That's the backs.
Yes.
And I will either Audric in space, just running someone over, Logan in space, shifting somebody, or Chris Tyregan in space and just running fast. Those are some stuff that I could see,
No doubt.
Yes. Special teams to me could also be another key to this game, Ryan. Here's a big shocker, right? I'm going to throw something at you that you're going to be really floored by. Okay. Prepare yourself for this. Shane Beamer has really good special teams. I know that's going to surprise you. Frank Beamer's kid
Beamer Ball has
and being a special teams coach most of his career. Number one, according to the FEI, Brian Fremeau does the efficiency index, which I really like the job he does with that stuff. Number one ranked special teams in the country.
Wow.
It's not very often that Notre Dame was 6th, by the way. It's not very often Notre Dame has been in a game this year where the other opponent had a better special teams results. And as a matter of fact, it hasn't happened yet. That's another part that's going to be an important part of this game too, Ryan, is just the finishing the special team strong. No big mistakes, those type of things. Can you find ways to maybe, steal some yards there? I'm very curious to see how Brian Mason goes against another well-coached special teams. That's one of the things that maybe people don't want to talk about, but I'm fascinated by that. 2 really well-coached special teams doing battle. That's going to be very interesting.
Oh, man, they're the Notre Dame punt block unit against the South Carolina punt coverage or punt. Well, they're blocking as well, but you know what I mean. Punt protection unit. Mm-hmm. That should be a nice little conversation, man. Where's the pressure going to come from? What is your protections up front? I mean, look, in this, again, I talked about this already, but in a game that a lot of people are projecting to be a close football game that could go either way, having those types of moments in the special teams area of the game, I mean, one, you can't do anything that's just going to kill your momentum, right? So, let's protect the football. No stupid stuff like muff punts or, negative plays, bad snaps. Those things just can't happen, right? But it is going to be interesting, Brian, because, I mean, when Virginia Tech was at its best, I'm going to go back to Frank Beamer for a second. Beamer ball was not just defense and running the football. Beamer ball was, we're going to block some punts. We're going to flip the field position. That's what Beamer ball was built off of, right? And Shane does have those elements in there in his arsenal, obviously, with what he's done as a special teams coach and what he's done this year for South Carolina as a from the special teams perspective as well. So we have lauded and really given Brian Mason all the credit he deserves this year with how great he's done. But this is one of those money games, I guess, right? This is one of those ones where you can't kill yourself if you can flip field position from time to time with the punt return, or if you can get the kick return game going a little bit more potentially as well. So I think that this is a sneaky aspect of this game because you got 2 very good special teams teams going against 2 special teams units that don't really hurt themselves a ton, right? There's not a ton of negative plays. So is there a swing play in those games, a negative play that flips the momentum in either team's direction? I think it comes down to which special teams unit is the cleanest in this football game because it's two units that don't usually make a ton of mistakes.
Yep. So that's going to be the fun part of it, Ryan. So this game is going to be, expectations are high. We need to see this Notre Dame team come out ready to play. We need to see this team coming out fired up. We need to see this team come out and win. That's going to be the key. And so, we'll start diving in next week and the week after. We'll start diving into more specific types of this matchup, get into a little bit more of the scheme, the personnel matchups, keys to victory, all that kind of stuff we'll get into as we get closer to the game. But this at least gives you a cursory look at kind of what the expectations are, why we think Notre Dame should be a team that looked at to win, but also why a win over South Carolina is one you have to earn. Right. This is a well-coached football team, in my opinion, Ryan. I think that's the one thing that you miss is this is and there's been a change at offensive coordinator, right? Was Marcus Satterfield was their offensive coordinator, correct?
He was.
He's gone. Yeah. They've hired a new guy. A lot of excitement about him. That's another aspect of it. Okay, what's he going to run? What's going to be different? So I think those are things that you look at and say, hey, this is this is something that you got to look at and say, hey, look, this is going to be a game. This is going to be a game we have to earn. This isn't Iowa State versus Notre Dame 2020 or 2019. Right. This is a much better contest. And so we're going to learn a lot about Notre Dame from that. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And that's why I think a victory would mean more, because you're beating somebody that's like, look, they're ranked higher than you. You're only a 2-point favorite. A lot of people are predicting them to beat you. Okay, go out and earn it. Prove some people wrong. And that's what's going to make this fun. And I expect this team to come out ready to play. We just haven't. That just hasn't been an issue very often for Notre Dame. I mean, outside of Marshall and Stanford, and right. I mean, so it's happened. Mm-hmm. But in big games, like even USC, that game was. Well, actually, I'm going to take that back. I didn't think the defense was mentally ready to play that game. I think it's because of the passive game plan. They were on their heels just from the game plan standpoint. It's hard to be aggressive when you're on your heels from the game plan standpoint. But I thought the Notre Dame offense came out fired up and ready to play.
Yeah.
They just didn't execute.
Yeah.
I mean, that was really it.
Agreed.
That was really it. So that's going to do it. That's going to do it here. Now, as we get into the end of this game or into this breakdown, we're going to get into the mailbag next. So we have a lot of questions in the mailbag, and we'll get into a lot of those. So we have some super chats and all those kind of things. So thanks to everybody for joining us for this part of the show. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com, and check out our main site at irishbreakdown.com. Let's get into the mailbag, Ryan. We have several super chats here and let you answer some of these as well. And this one's from Jay Clampton Investments. Thank you very, very much. How frustrated are you right now? You guys put in so much work and effort. The feeling is worse than BK PTSD.
I mean, I think there's a couple different vantage points for me, Brian, right? Like, how frustrated am I right now about everything that's happening? I would put it like this. It's unfortunate. At the end of the day, if Peyton Bowen doesn't end up with Notre Dame, I feel like it's going to take away a lot of the luster from what is, even without him, a very good Notre Dame class. And I honestly feel bad because I've gotten to know a lot of the recruits, obviously, in 2023 that are going to be signing with Notre Dame. And it's very unfortunate that it's kind of tarnishing the fact that they are putting together a great class, right? Like it would be very unfortunate if that were to happen. It doesn't technically affect me, right? Because I covered the team. Yes, I want them to do very well, but at the end of the day, my livelihood isn't based upon what the recruiting class ultimately looks like, right? I'm going to cover it regardless. But I feel really bad for the players that I've gotten to know, the parents that I've gotten to know, that this has become such a more of a headline over the fact that Marcus Freeman and his staff have still killed it on the recruiting trail. They have. It's still a really good class, regardless of what the finish looks like here. It's just very unfortunate for me, is like the biggest thing. So I'm frustrated because I feel like it's a lot of things that are out of the staff's control too, right? Like I could handle there being blunders and maybe there being some missteps, but there's a lot of things that have happened in this recruiting process this year that aren't really in Notre Dame's control, which is unfortunate, right? Like It's not an even playing field. I saw someone say yesterday that I would love to see Marcus Freeman put together a class in the pre-NIL era, and I'm just like, it would be dominant. Like it would just. But
this class is. Can I just interrupt you here, real quick, Ryan?
Of course. Yeah.
Let's just say hypothetically, Notre Dame loses Jaden Lamar and Peyton Bowen.
Sure.
Big losses.
Sure.
The problem is we'll never be able to get people to see the class for what it is. It'll always be what it should have been. Yep. You should have had Dante. I'm good with where they are at quarterback, by the way. You should have had Keon. You should have had Peyton. Okay.
Sure.
Get all that. But here's the thing. If this class never had those three players in it, Notre Dame fans would be looking at this class fired up. This is the best receiver class we've signed in for a long time. You've got one of the most explosive running backs in the country. You got a legit fast rising quarterback that even though he played half a year has all of a sudden everybody jumping him up into their top 200, right? You got arguably the best offensive line class in the country. You have 4 defensive linemen that are now all ranked as a top 200 player by at least one service. So you're bummed that Keon Keeley didn't come. How many people have 4 defensive linemen in the class that are all ranked as at least 2 top 200 players by at least one service? And I think 2 of them are ranked as top 100 guys by at least one service. You have arguably the best linebacker class in the country, arguably the best cornerback class in the country. And yes, you're losing. If you lose Peyton Bowen, you still have a Don Shula, you still have Ben Minich, and you could also have, potentially a Brandon Hillman, who's one of the most versatile athletes who now all of a sudden is blowing up as a recruit and jumping into people's top 200s. If you took what they didn't have away, if Peyton Bowen never committed to Notre Dame, if Keon Keeley never committed to Notre Dame, people are looking at this class different because it's still a top 5 class to me in that instance. And that's the frustrating thing. Not frustrating, disappointing thing. It's because and I'm not blaming people. I get it. I'm going to feel that way.
I get it too.
I've said it because we've said, oh, man, could you just imagine if they still had Keon?
Sure.
How many times have we said that?
Yeah.
Right? Dante, like I said, I'm good with.
Brian, perfect example. Sorry to cut you off, but I just
cut you off. It's only fair.
I posted my Armel Mukum senior piece on the board earlier, right? Because I watched Armel Mukum. I know you watched it too, and Armel Mukum took a huge step forward. I mean, he was ranked as the number 191 player by 247 now. I mean, he took a massive step, right? I posted that in the thing, and the first comment I got on the board was, I don't think anybody's really going to care since Notre Dame might lose Peyton Bowen. I'm just like, why is that what we're talking about in a piece that is highlighting Armel Mukum and the progress he made on a season? That was my point to start this conversation, is I feel bad for a lot of the players in this class because it's a very good class with or without Peyton Bowen. And now that if they doesn't end up in the class, and if Jaden Lamar doesn't end up in the class, it's going to take the luster off of what is still a very good class for some people from a national media perspective. And it's just, and from a Notre Dame fan perspective too. And it's a shame, man, because I mean, you're missing out on a lot of really good football players that are going to be a part of the solution, right? They are. And I wish that we would just appreciate, like, I wish you could read an Armel Mukum piece about his progress as a senior year and be like, wow, that's awesome. He really did look good. I watched his film. I agree. He looked a lot better. He's going to be a good player down the line when he's developed properly, instead of turning that into Peyton Bowen, right? Like, just highlight the good parts too, not just the negative.
And what does it have to do with Peyton Bowen? It'd be one thing if you're like, man, but Keon was better. Yeah, okay, great,
sure,
he is,
sure.
But that's the thing is you just have to look at it and say, you have to look at what it is. This is still a gap closing class. It's not a gap erasing class. And with Keon and Peyton, it's close to being that, because we've said this, gap closing is one of two things. It's either A, you just get the big time players that don't go to those schools, number one, or B, you are doing better than what you have been doing. So Alabama's widening the gap based on what? They've got the number one class. That's not widening the gap. That's just who they are. Right? It's just who they are. That's what they're doing. This isn't
they had how many years of
one this isn't like wow, this class is even better than the ones they've had before.
Right.
And second of all, I'll take Kenny Minchie over Eli Holstein every single day of the freaking week and 8 times on Saturday. And I don't care what the rankings say. I'll challenge everybody in here. Go watch the film and tell me, why is that kid ranked the top 100? Where's he going to school?
Yeah.
That matters, people. It does. And we could do a whole show on that, about how kids go commit to Bama and all of a sudden they skyrocket up the rankings.
We talked about that slot receiver that's rated above Jaden Greathouse the other day. Like,
like, what are you watching? Oh, he's committed to Bama. Oh, I get it. Makes total sense.
Jaden Greathouse is one of the most productive wide receivers ever in 6A in the state of Texas. Like, that stuff matters, man.
Right. But he's not a top 247 player in the country. Okay, sure. There's 49 better players in the state, or 48 better players in the state of Texas, according to 247 than Jaden.
You remember the was it On 3, or I forget which one it was, that had Micah Bell as the 67th best player in the state of Texas?
In the state of Texas. Of Texas.
Yeah.
So, again, this class is not as good as it could have been.
Sure.
The difference is between this class and past classes is the past classes, they didn't get kids because of their own lack of doing it the right way. There's nothing they could have done differently. And if they lose Peyton Bowen, okay, it sucks. It sucks.
Sure does.
But still a heck of a class. Still a heck of a class. And that's what needs to be focused on. Is there a way to get those kids in the future? I don't know. You just got to find a kid that's willing to, find the next Jeremiah Love that's willing to turn down those things. The next Christian Gray. I mean, look, let me tell you all something. Peyton Bowen is not the only kid in this class that's been offered pretty big NIL deals. That's a fact.
There's several players, several playmakers on the offensive side of the football that have been offered a lot of money in this
Some
class.
kids are willing to say, I'm going to bet on myself that, yes, I'm turning down some big early money to go to Notre Dame because I feel in 20 years I'm going to blow past that whatever I'm being offered. Some kids look and say, I want the immediate payoff. Okay, that's fine. You have that right. I may not agree with it, but it doesn't make you – like every kid that takes NIL money is not a bad, selfish, greedy kid. Some kids may need it. Some kids may not have been kind of taught why this may not be a good idea, right? And some kids just say, I understand that it's a risk, but I'm betting on myself to still get developed.
Yes.
There's a lot of reasons that it's like you take the money and it's like it doesn't make you a bad kid. You're taking advantage of the system that's in play right now and the fact that there's no enforcement of it. Okay,
it doesn't make you a bad kid at all.
Other kids are saying, I get that, but I believe there's a different way for me and a better way and a harder way.
I'll tell this story a little more in depth on signing day when everything's over with, but I had a recruit in the 2023 class that is committed to Notre Dame that literally texted me yesterday and said, I don't care about the short term. I want to be great long term. And I'm just like, that's the kid that needs to be in this class.
They've got to find those kids. And some of them are big time players.
Yes.
I mean, Christian Gray, Jaden Greathouse, Braylon James, these are all kids that we've heard rumors about being flipped. Well, why do you think there was rumors about them being flipped? Because reporters are being told that schools were offering them big money. And these people just assumed, well, if this kid's being offered that, well, that means he's going to flip, right?
Right.
No. That's where the Jeremiah Love rumors came from. That's where the Braylon James rumors came from. But it's like, but you don't know the James family, do you? Because they understand what that money would mean for that family. They do. They also understand what this Notre Dame education means for Braylon.
Yes.
And they get that. There are people out there like that.
There are. The James family, the Love family, the Schuler family. There's a lot of
the Minchie family.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we could play this game all day, you know. And that's not a knock on the kids that walked away from it. Again, I don't have a problem with a kid taking the money. I only ever would have a problem with the way they did it and 100%. If they're upfront about it.
Yeah.
Now they can only be so upfront about it because it's illegal. Right. So that's why kids push back like, hey, that's not what the offer was. It's because they'd have to admit, yeah, of course I got offered that. You may want to rethink that, kid. Why? That's not legal.
Yes.
So of course they're not going to say that. Nor should they. If I was advising them, hey, bro, you may not want to admit that, man, because why? Because that's illegal. Can't do that. They can't entice you with an offer, but from a collective or something else. So those are the things that you look at and say, I get it. But the reality is the only frustrating thing for me, I'm not frustrated with what happened yet. I'm frustrated that people continue to steal our information and put it out publicly. That pisses me off. But I'm not going to back down from what we stated on the board and the intel we dropped because it's true. Right? And I don't have a problem with what Peyton tweeted last night because he needs to do that. He needs to be able to say that. He can't say if it is the reason that he chooses. He can't say that. It's just not possible.
Right.
But the only frustration for me is that, and then the fact that people are just, if he jumps out of the class, and this, again, it hasn't happened yet, but if he does decommit, it's the narrative is always going to be what this class could have been.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be enough people until the class gets to Notre Dame and proves it. Mm-hmm. There's not going to be enough people that say, man, I wish, that we could focus on what this class is.
Yep.
Because what this class is really good.
Yep.
Hey, you're complaining about Notre Dame's quarterback issues? They got one of the best in the country coming in. They don't have enough playmakers on offense. They got arguably the best group of playmakers coming in. They're not real. They need more physical blockers. They've got 5 of them coming in. And Notre Dame, here's one. Notre Dame's not real big on the defensive line. Well, let me introduce you to these monsters. Right? They need to get more speed at linebacker. Check. Man, that last year's corner class was pretty good, but you need another one and maybe some dudes that can run. Check and check. I was told that because it's funny, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and I had a question. I was like, I was talking about Christian Gray's speed, and I said, do you think he can run like the house, and they're like, no, he actually did that at Notre Dame too. He didn't run a 4.4 flat at Notre Dame, but he ran in the 4.4s at Notre Dame too when he camped a couple years ago. It's like, okay, awesome. Cool. And then you saw it on film this year more. Yep. Okay, check. All right. I mean, what didn't they check? Okay, they didn't get the 5 stars that we know of, but people said that last year too, and I would argue that Benjamin Morrison is absolutely playing like a 5-star right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, they don't get any 5-star defensive linemen. Okay, maybe not. But does anyone want to tell me that Isaiah Foskey hasn't played like a 5-star the last 2 years?
Your all-time leading sacker at Notre Dame, like yeah,
right,
exactly. Will Fuller's one of the best receivers we've seen, and he was mostly a 3-star rated.
ESPN player. He was the lowest ranked player in Notre Dame's class, in Will Fuller was, and ESPN also didn't believe that Quentin Nelson was a top 100 player coming out of high school.
Yep,
you know.
And the great thing that the staff has done, I know people are going to hear this right now with, the Keon stuff, the Peyton Bowen stuff, whatever. But the great thing that Chad Bowden, Marcus Freeman, and this staff have done on the recruiting side is they also have accumulated a lot of depth at every position in this class. So even if you do lose a Peyton Bowen, hey man, Adon Schuler and Ben Minich is still a pretty dang good safety group, isn't it? Brandon Hillman could be a guy that maybe could play safety too if you need him to. So yes, you the wide receivers, right? You lost Dylan Edwards. Well, you still have Jaden Greathouse, Braylon James, Caleb Smith, Rico Flores. Like, you're still good there, man. You're still good. You lose Jane Lamar potentially, maybe. Oh, well, you still got Jeremiah Love, and you still have all those running back monsters that are already on campus right now, including Jadarian Price coming back from injury. So Notre Dame's doing a good job, I think, of kind of checking those boxes and getting that depth in the class. So they'll be fine. They'll be fine.
Yeah. Next one here from, and again, thanks for that super chat, Jay Clampett. Wicked Bronco Productions. I'm not fully bought into South Carolina as a team or Rattler. Pine had more TDs than him by a lot. Anyways, do you guys think Freeman plays both Angeli and Buckner? More Tobias? Any portal updates? I think that quarterback touchdown thing is a little bit misleading. Mm-hmm. And the reason I would say that is because, number one, Drew Pine played behind an offensive line in a run game that averaged almost 200 yards a game, or about 200 yards a game, when he was the starter.
Sure.
Right. Because he didn't start against Marshall and North Carolina or Ohio State when they didn't run a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't asked to carry the offense the way that Spencer Rattler was. Now, I'm cool with you saying you're not bought into Spencer Rattler. Cool. Because, again, for the 2 great games he had late, Ryan, we also pointed out that they weren't always that good. Right. There's a lot of reasons to have some doubts about Spencer Rattler. I just don't think taking that little statistic really, I think it can just be a little bit misleading, in my opinion. That's all I'm going to say.
It can be a cherry pick stats, because if you start talking about, what are the passing yardage totals? What are the completion percentages? Right. What are, so there's a debate that you can have there. So,
right. And weapons and all that other kind of stuff, here's what I do know. Drew Pine was much better at protecting the football than Spencer Rattler. But again, he wasn't asked to make some of the throws that Spencer Rattler was being asked to make either.
Spencer Rattler's taking a lot more chances than Drew Pine is, to your point. Yes.
Spencer Rattler was Notre Dame's quarterback. His numbers would look a lot different. They would. I'm not saying he'd be a winner. I mean, I'd still have some other issues with him. Yeah. But yes, that is something that I would see. To his other questions, do you guys think Freeman plays both Angeli and Buckner? I think it depends on how they feel about Tyler's conditioning level, to be honest with you. And I hope they both play, because at the very least, if they both play, it means Notre Dame most likely blew South Carolina out. Like, if he's playing because of that, cool. More Tobias, I definitely think we'll see more of him from what I've been told. Any portal updates? No, I think Notre Dame's portal stuff is going to happen closer to the bowl game and after is when we'll start to see more of that stuff.
They got their kicker. Got Spencer Schrader.
Because y'all got to remember, there's going to be some kids that jump into the portal after bowl games.
Yes.
What's the 18th it closes, Ryan? January 18th, I believe. Something like that. But it's in January is when it closes.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to see some more kids jump in, and there's been some kids that Notre Dame's been on that have picked other schools, and there's going to be some kids that Notre Dame gets on. And look, there's buzz in like coaches hear other stuff. Hey, so and so is probably going to get in the portal after the bowl game. Oh, really? Okay, cool. So there's going to be positions that are going to be coming open after the bowl games too, as they start, because it's just an open period. I mean, once I thought originally it closed at some point in time in December and then opened again in January, but it just stays open.
Yeah.
Is the way that it is now. So there's going to be more in there.
So we're going to be busy well after.
I think there was this assumption, Ryan, that every kid that was going to jump on the portal was going to do so the first day.
On the first day, yeah.
And that's not really how
free
it works.
agency.
Yeah,
right?
It's not really how it works. I mean, it is free agency, but it doesn't work timing-wise that way.
Yeah, you just usually see in like the free agent period of NFL, like usually like 80% of the contracts are signed the first day, and then it's like trickles the rest of the way.
That's the nutty part about it. So
yes, it is.
Yeah. I just want to stress again how much I would appreciate people that are on our site not taking shots of our content and putting it on Twitter or other sites.
Yeah.
I just would appreciate that out of respect, at the very least, just out of respect. Brock Fonville, thank you for your super chat. What if people start paying outrageous amounts for players like CJ Carr? Will Notre Dame eventually have to join NIL to compete if nothing is done? Listen, let me tell you all something. Notre Dame is never going to jump in NIL from an enticing recruits standpoint unless the NCAA makes it legal.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
So whether they should or shouldn't or any, I don't think they should. I'm still a believer of, I don't necessarily want that kind of problem on my team where I've got to have a third string safety making more than, anybody on my defense, or a third string quarterback making X amount of dollars, making more than my offensive coordinator or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to deal with, think about some of the stuff we've heard with Tennessee late in the year with the guys having issues with, well, you're making this and you're making that. And so there's jealousy towards your quarterback instead of having your quarterback's back or something like that with some people.
Yep.
I don't want that. I want a kid that wants to be here. Because here's the deal. A kid who's just coming here because I gave you money is going to leave as soon as he's unhappy. You want an example? Texas A&M, Alabama. Two perfect examples, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Georgia doesn't get in the transfer portal market as much. They run their program a little different. I don't see a lot of kids leaving there that are starters and that are doing things right. Michigan hasn't had losses of guys that were starters. They had losses of guys who'd kind of gotten passed up through their play or in Eric All's situation, sort of injuries, right? And so those are programs that are saying, hey, we're not going to play that game, right? How many portal kids did Georgia have in their rotation this year?
0. I was about to say probably none, if any. Yeah.
Their leading receiver left to go to Bama.
Yep.
He got more NIL money. Guess what he's not doing right now? Competing for a championship.
True.
Right? I still believe that's the way to build this. That's the best way to keep a team together to where guys aren't leaving after year one because they're not happy. Mm-hmm. And what do you say? Hold on a second. We gave that guy $1 million. What? Okay, well, that's not legal, so you can't admit that. Right? Because schools are screwed just as much as the kids are. Yep. And so I just don't want to build a team that way if it's illegal. And even if it's legal, I don't necessarily want to do it that way because you're hiring mercenaries, not kids who want to be here for the right reasons. And at Notre Dame, that matters more because it's harder at Notre Dame. We've never said that. You got $3 million NIL deal. Yeah, but you still have to go to class. You still have to go to study tables. You still have to do this. You have to do this. And if a kid's just there because you offered him the best deal, we'll do all that stuff, man. I'm going to play football. Well, no, you're here because of the education. No, that's not why I signed with you guys. I signed with you guys because you offered me X amount of dollars. Okay. Well, good luck wherever you're going to transfer to. Do you really want to get into that game? I don't know if I do. I'd rather find the next Isaiah Foskey, develop him, than to go buy Damon Wilson.
Yeah.
I just would. Because I feel like I can win more with that guy, that kind of guy.
I think in a couple of years too, we're going to be in a situation because I think that it has to change at some point, right? There has to be some type of restriction or something on it. But Brian, can you imagine in a couple of years, there's going to be that one player that it didn't work out for that's going to now come out in front of everyone and say, University X gave me $6 million under the table that was fully compensation for pay for play. It had nothing to do with NIL. And then there's going to be backlash. There's going to be things handed down. And it's going to be a mess, man. It is. That's why I always call it the Wild West because that's really what it is right now. Teams have no direction. They have no understanding. Well, players have no direction more than anything as far as what they're signing themselves into. Teams are doing whatever they want because now they can justify it with the word NIL instead of what it actually is. And then stuff's going to hit the fan here pretty soon. It's going to happen because as these kids start to get more and more money, and for the ones that do not turn out right, you're going to hear a lot of stories that are going to come out as far as how they're treated, how they weren't treated well, what, they were gypped of money, the school didn't give them what they were promised, all those types of things. It's going to happen. And that's why I think that, maybe this new president is going to be a part of the change. I don't know. All I know is there has to be change at some point because things are going to get bad here, folks. It's going to get really, really bad before it gets any better.
I want to bring this comment up from Tom Happy, who's a South Carolina fan that's joined us now for a couple shows. He said, no disrespect intended, but I think Notre Dame's weaknesses in the upcoming bowl have been at quarterback. Yeah, bro, that's no disrespect. That's truth. I mean, you're not going to get no argument here, partner, right? I mean, Notre Dame's had some quarterbacks at times, but look, we'll sit there and say it here. I mean, we've said this here. The thing that's held Notre Dame back in a lot of years, 2015 was not one of those years. That was a defensive year. But past that, 2017, quarterback issues. 2018, quarterback issues. 2019, 2020. One of the biggest differences. Now, there was other differences between Notre Dame and Bama in 2020. But the most glaring was a quarterback, in my opinion. The perimeter, they had more skill in the perimeter than Notre Dame did, and there's some other things like that. But in the trenches, Notre Dame went toe-to-toe in the trenches with Alabama that year. I mean, just pop on the film and you'll see that. Where Alabama was better was they had better athletes on the perimeter, and they were way better quarterback.
Yes.
That was the difference. 2018, the only difference between Notre Dame and Clemson, in my opinion, was quarterback. You flip quarterbacks in that game, and I think the score looks somewhat similar. I think Clemson would have scored Notre Dame would have scored maybe a little more. Maybe Clemson scores a little bit more. Who knows? But it would have been a rout if you flip quarterbacks.
By the way, you just reminded me, Trevor Lawrence just had maybe one of the best games I've ever seen a quarterback play in the NFL this past week, man. He was – I know you're not an NFL guy, but you should go watch, dude. He was making some throws that were just out.
You're like, okay, now that's the Trevor we thought we would see.
Dude, back shoulder balls, in pocket manipulation. It was just a clinic. He's playing fantastic the last few weeks, Trevor Lawrence. Fantastic.
Yep.
He hasn't thrown an interception in like 5 weeks or something like
that's
that.
Good.
6 weeks.
Good. Yeah. He's talented. He just went to that's one of the problems about being a highly ranked quarterback and a well-regarded quarterback is you're most likely, more often than not, going to a team that stinks.
Not only a bad franchise for the last few years, but also Urban Meyer was your first head coach in the NFL. Man.
Like let's not like I'm a John Elway fan, right? Let's not act like him getting traded to the Broncos didn't help his career be better.
Compared to if he would have went to the Colts.
Right, because they were a terrible franchise. And that's exactly why John Elway wasn't going to go there. Right. But he went to, I think the Broncos made the playoffs with like Steve DeBerg the year before, I believe. Elway got there. So, I mean, that's important. I mean, it didn't help. The Steelers were down when they drafted Ben Roethlisberger. They still were drafting like 11th or 12th. They just had a down year. They weren't a bad franchise, which is often what you see in these situations.
Was Dan Reeves the coach when Elway was traded to the Broncos? He was the coach at that time? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He played for Dan Reeves and then Wade Phillips for a couple of years and then Mike Shanahan. Those were his three head coaches.
It's not bad.
He actually had the most yards of his career playing for Wade Phillips.
That's funny.
That was, I think, the only year he ever threw for over 4,000 yards, which at the time, that was a lot of stinking yards.
Yes.
But yeah.
Dude, that was like when Dan Marino set the touchdown record in 1984 with 48. The previous record, I think, was like 35 by Dan Fouts.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is what was wild about that one was I'm going to look up the numbers, but I think like the next closest guy just had like way fewer stats. I'm actually going to pull that up because it was actually kind of funny. I've looked this up before. Yeah, he threw 48 touchdowns. The next highest guy was Dave Craig with 32. You remember him from the Seahawks. And then the next highest, Neil Lomax and Joe Montana were tied at 28. Then there was four other quarterbacks that were in the 20s. Lynn Dickey at 25, Joe Theismann at 24, Tony Eason at 23, Phil Simms at 22. The number 9 quarterback that year had 19.
That was like when Babe Ruth hit like 26 home runs. I think one of his first years, he set the home run record. It was like 10 before 26.
Like that's a wild stat right there, man. But I do miss the fact that we just mentioned 2 Notre Dame guys.
Yeah,
in the top 10. Joe Theismann was a Notre Dame guy, and Joe Montana. It'd be nice if we can get back to having that conversation. Having Notre Dame quarterbacks be guys that we're talking about as NFL production.
Yeah.
So yeah, that and then he had 5. Now the one thing they had similar is yards. I didn't like. It was weird. You had a couple offenses that threw for a mess of yards. One surprised me, Ryan, when I went and looked at 1984 because I did this look up one time. I was like, I think Marino was like way ahead in yards too. But that year, Neil Lomax for the Cardinals had 4,600 yards. Phil Simms threw for 4,044 yards that year.
Wow.
Like here's what made the NFL different back then. Here's the interceptions they threw. Dan Marino, 17. Neil Lomax, 16. Phil Simms, 18. Dan Fouts, 17. Remember I said Dave Craig had 32 touchdowns? 24 picks. 18 from Steve DeBerg. 23 from Paul McDonald. 13 from Joe Theismann. 14 from Warren Moon. 19 from Lynn Dickey. 15 from Gary Danielson. 14 from Ron Jaworski. 18 from John Elway. 19 from Richard Todd. I mean, right? Joe Montana had 10, and Tony Eason only had 8, but Tony Eason only started 13 games that year.
Mm-hmm.
You only had 2 guys with 10 or less interceptions. Now, if you throw like 10 plus interceptions, you had a bad year in the NFL because it was such more of a vertical passing game then than it is now. And it's just you remember Elway would take like 7 and 9 step drops from under set. He's throwing crossing routes from like 15 yards behind.
Dude, some of those guys looked like they were javelin throwers, man. Like they made a runway and then just stepped into it. Like what the heck?
All right. Wild. It was wild, but I don't know how we got into talking about that. But yeah, Notre Dame quarterback production has certainly been a problem.
Yeah.
So absolutely agree with that. David Hess with a super chat. Thank you, David. I expect the Irish O-line to impose its will in 200-yard rushers. Irish roll big against the suspect SC defense. Onward, Notre Dame. I hope so. Hope you're right. I do want to see them. I'm totally fine with 200-yard rushers as long as they also throw for like 250 in the game. I'd like to see that as well.
Should have an opportunity to run the football against that defense. So yeah, let's do it, man.
Little quick team note that just got released. Isaiah Foskey and Michael Mayer were both named consensus All-Americans. I want to say once again, it is a joke that Michael Mayer was not a unanimous All-American. The fact that one of those services had Brock Bowers ahead of him is Football Writers Association of America, which figures, had Brock Bowers first team. But yes, still great honor for both of them. Consensus All-American is a tremendous honor. Unanimous All-Americans are rare, right? Notre Dame has had a couple recently. I think Quentin Nelson, I believe, was a unanimous All-American.
He better have been.
I think Jalen Smith was. But yeah, I mean, it's
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, maybe.
I think he was. Let me look this up. But I think he was.
Yeah.
But I just want to look this up for sure because I don't want to definitely say for sure. Here's great. There's an article from Loose Emoji. I miss him so much. But yes, he said Owusu-Koramoah was.
Nice.
Julian Love was. Nice. Here's the other guys from that list. Bob Crable, George Connor, Bill Fisher. Oh, no, they didn't actually. Bob Crable was not. Here's who it was. Okay, here's someone no name. Okay, it's Johnny Lujak and Ralph Guglielmi from I butchered that, I'm sure. Quarterback, running backs Emil Sitko and Nick Eddy. Receivers Golden Tate, Tim Brown, and Rocket Ismail.
Nice.
Tight end Leon Hart, Ken McAfee. Offensive line, a little bigger list. Joe Kurth, Ed Boehner, Dick Arrington, John Scully, Quentin Nelson, and Aaron Taylor. Defensive line, Mike McCoy, Walt Potolsky, Greg Marks, Steve Niehaus, Ross Browner, Chris Zorich. Linebackers, Jim Lynch, Bob Golick, Manti Te'o, Michael Stonebreaker, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. So Jalen Smith was not. That is nuts.
Michael Floyd wasn't on that list either.
No.
That's pretty wild.
No. I don't think anyone had Michael Floyd as a first-team All-American when
really?
he came out. I don't believe so.
Interesting.
No. And Tyler Eifert wasn't on there either, which is also absurd. But yeah, just silly. But that's a different conversation for a different day.
Wait. So you're telling me that so Michael Mayer's a consensus All-American, but he doesn't win the John Mackey Award?
Pretty much.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, exactly. And then defensive backs, Todd Light, Shane Walton, Frank Caridio, and John Latner. So Julian Love was not. And I remember that. Julian Love was a second teamer. So, yeah, Julian Love was not on the coach's first team. Michael Mayer was also not on the coach's first team, which is whatever. So, yeah, so congratulations to those guys.
Absolutely.
Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Coach, keep your head up. It always is, buddy. And it's because of people like you. I'm serious, right? The real ones know what's really going down, and you didn't just put nonsense up for the heck of it. You got your followers. You're growing big time. Thanks for the year so far. I appreciate that, Charlie. I do. And I know that's not your real name. I know your real name. I appreciate it. Just sign up for the Shamrock Club, by the way.
Oh, I don't know his real name. Oh,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I'll tell you afterwards. Good dude, though. Real good dude.
It'll always be Charlie Weiss's last belt.
Yes, exactly. If I ever met him, like, hey, Charlie Weiss's last belt, my name is no, it's not. No, it's not.
CWLBL.
Yeah, his name C-Dub. But I appreciate that. And I think, look, honestly, guys, I got a buddy of mine. He's like, I'm declaring World War III on. So I'm like, dude, don't sweat it, man. Like, those people aren't on the site. If they're not on the site already and they know who I am, then I mean, it's not going to change anything. But it's all good. Don't let your blood pressure get up. But it's because I've had so many people have reached out to me with stuff like this, Ryan, that I appreciate it very much. And then he also had another super chat here, and it was Brian and Ryan. How does Notre Dame truly get over the bump? I understand developing an execution, but at some point we have to get some 5 stars. This is how now Keon, Dante, possibly Peyton, C. Downs, and Pemba were interested as well. I don't think Notre Dame has to get 5 stars recruiting. Notre Dame has to get 5-star talents.
Identify kids.
Is the odds greater with kids that have obvious talent? Sure. No one admits that. The stats are what they are. I would just remind people that we just went to unanimous All-Americans in Notre Dame. The most recent unanimous All-American was a 3-star recruit, Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah. Right? Now, those guys are hard to find, but that's what you have to do. And like they flipped Will Fuller from Penn State. Nobody was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they flipped Will Fuller from Penn State. But he turned out to be a heck of a player.
Yep.
So, yeah, it'd be great to get the Manti Te'os. Manti was a phenomenal player. 5-star top 10 national player. If you can get that guy, great. Go for that guy. But just understand you can't put all your eggs in that basket right now. But also go for the Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoahs. Right? The Jaden Alsberries, who maybe don't have that elite 5-star talent, but I think has that kind of upside. I mean, that's why we do the grade that we do, current and upside, right? Like Jeremiah Love, he may not be a 5-star now, but if that kid can put it all together, he may end up being a 5-star in college. Yeah. And that's the key, right? I mean, like Braylon James is not a 5-star kid right now because he's kind of raw. He's got a lot, but if it all kind of goes together for him,
be a star.
He could be. Absolutely.
Well, how about the defensive ends too, Brian? Like, I mean, Boubacar Traore and Armel Mukim, if they tap into their potential, like how good could that duo be? Like,
right. Yeah. Now the danger is there's some lower floor with that. Joe Walt's another one, right? Joe Walt is a legitimate 5-star college football player already as a sophomore.
No doubt.
Now, I gave him a very high upside grade coming out, Ryan, but not that high. I gave him a 4.5-star upside grade. But that's why you do it, because he was not that guy in high school. But you could see the potential there. Right. He's been even better than I thought. He's been a 5-star. And so that's the thing, Charlie. You are right. Notre Dame is not going to take a bunch of Julian, like I'm trying to think, like you've got your Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoahs, right? Give me a team of those guys and Julian Loves and Will Fullers, and I'm going to win a lot of games. But you can't take a bunch of – I'm trying to think of just a really good, steady, solid player that you love to have. Like you can't have a team full of Jalen Elliott's and win championships. Right. The Jalen Elliott's have to be complemented by the Julian Loves and the Jerry Tillerys who played like a 5-star that year, and the Julian Aguaras who played phenomenal that year. You You have to have those guys, right? Like you give me 11 Chris Browns on offense, and I'm going to be a good football team, but I'm not winning a championship. Chris Brown's a good, solid, complimentary football player, but I need my Will Fuller on the other side. I need my CJ Prosise at running back, and I need 3 5-stars on my offensive line, right? Like you need to get those guys. Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, not top 100 recruits.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right. Not a top 200 recruit.
Yeah.
No, Michael Mayer was a 5-star. Great.
Sure.
He was. But not all those guys are, and that's the thing that you have to look at. I mean, what was Dalton Kincaid coming out of college, right? I mean, we had that guy that was kind of
he was a 0-star recruit that went to San Diego, which by the way, San Diego's in the Pioneer League in the FCS, which means he was a non-scholarship player at San Diego.
Right. So Jamar Chase, I believe, was a 5-star recruit. He was at the very least highly, highly regarded. I'm looking up his ranking right now, Ryan. He was, let's see here, the number 52 overall player in the country. 24/7 Sports had him as a 5-star, number 19 in the country. His grade got ranked because ESPN had him at number. Here's the absurdity of it, y'all. ESPN had Jamar Chase as the number 42 wide receiver in the country in 2018. Okay, but Justin Jefferson was every bit as good of a player as Jamar Chase. Maybe Chase slightly. There were stars. He was in the 2000s coming out of high school.
Wild.
Right? You've got to be good at finding those players and developing those players. That's why this is why people want to know why I get so hard on Notre Dame when they don't have good position coaches. This is why. If you don't have a guy that's a great recruiter and a great evaluator of talent and a great coach, you're not going to reach your potential because you can't just go out-talent Bama and Georgia and Ohio State. You've got to out-coach them, out-develop them, out-scheme them and all that, and then you can win those games. You know who's mastered that the last 2 years? Michigan. How many 5-star recruits are 5-star players from Michigan right now? Not a lot.
No.
Not a lot. They lost their 5-stars off last year's team. Blake Corum wasn't that guy, right? I mean, Blake Corum was the only guy in the country this year, Ryan, that I think had a case to be in the conversation for best back in the country. And the reason Bijan won it in the end, in my opinion, is because Blake got hurt. Blake was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, but he was not in the top 100 by anybody.
Yeah.
Now, rivals had him just outside of 105, but he didn't play like a top 105 to 230 player like he was ranked. He played like a top 30 player this year.
Yeah.
So, Charlie, you are correct. They need to get some 5-stars. They do. My thing has always just been, but stop assuming that the only 5-stars are high school 5-stars. And that's my thing. And so I'm actually gonna pull something up, Ryan, because I do want to kind of make this point and just kind of hammer it home.
Well, LSU got a 5-star out of the transfer portal in Joe Burrow too. That helped him out pretty well too, right? So
correct. Who wasn't ranked as a 5-star, and no one thought was a 5 when they got him in the portal.
Exactly.
Right. But you look at Isaiah Foskey coming out of high school, and 247 Sports had him as the number 13 edge player. The number 13 weak side defensive end in this class. And, you look at some of the guys ahead of him and you're like, look at some of the guys that were ranked in the top 250 that year. It's like, man, you thought that guy was better than Isaiah Foskey? Really? Okay. That's kind of interesting. I'm not sure I buy that one, but that's the nature of it. I mean, that's kind of how it works. You know what I mean? Like, I'm actually going to pull up the number 1 player in the country that year was a defensive end named Antonio Alfano. You ever heard of him?
I do.
Right?
I have, because he was a New Jersey guy.
And you don't hear about him for good reasons, right? Some other weak side defensive ends that year, Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith's been a pretty darn good football player. He's the number 4 player in the country that year.
Yep.
He hasn't been better than Isaiah Foskey as a college football player. Kayvon Thibodeau was pretty good when healthy, right? But he wasn't healthy a ton. Isaiah Foskey had a lot more production than he had, right? Let's look at some of these other guys that were weak side defensive ends coming out of that class. Again, Nolan Smith, number 4 player in the country. Would you trade him for Isaiah Foskey? I wouldn't.
No.
Chris Bogle, number 49 player in the country.
I don't even know where he is anymore.
Right.
He was at Florida at one point. But
Adisa Isaac at Penn State, number 66 player in the country.
Solid player. Yeah.
Right. Good, solid player.
Yep.
The Latu kid from Washington. Did he transfer?
He's at UCLA now. He had a nice year this year.
Yeah. But better than Isaiah Foskey?
No.
I don't think so. right? Kevin Harris, who never even picked a school that
I don't
year.
even know who that is.
DeMonte Russell, never. I don't know if he picked a school. Who he signed with. King Witkuta from Alabama. You ever heard of him?
I think he transferred out
Right.
as well.
Stephen Herron went to Stanford. He was ranked higher than Isaiah Foskey. Would you trade him right now for Isaiah Foskey?
Absolutely not.
Jafari Harvey that went to Miami. He was ranked ahead of Isaiah Foskey. Derek Hall went to Auburn.
He's a good player.
Yeah. Better than Isaiah Foskey? I think so.
No.
Roman Harrison from Tennessee. Right. And then you get down here, all the way down here, the number 203 player in the country, Isaiah Foskey. So my whole point is you can't win with a bunch of good, solid players. Got to have some stars. Got to have stars. I'm just going to reiterate that not all stars are Keon Keeley, where it was obvious coming out of high school that he's going to be a star.
Yeah.
And I think if Keon keeps his head on straight, he will be. I love that kid. I think he's a phenomenal talent. Mm-hmm. Caleb Downs, same way. Yes. Peyton Bowen could be that guy if he keeps his head on straight at Notre Dame or somewhere else, right? He's a great player. Mm-hmm. But there's been other safeties that have turned into great players that weren't that guy coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. But you got to find them, and they're harder to – it's easy to look at Peyton Bowen and be like, yo, that's a dude.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to look at Keon and be like, yo, that's a dude. It's harder to look at a Boubacar Traore and be like, that's going to be a dude. You're taking a gamble there. You're taking a risk. And that's what the great teams do. I mean, Georgia's got some 5-star recruits on their team. Some of them play like 5 stars. Keely Ringo plays like a 5-star. I don't think Nolan Smith plays like a 5-star. It's good, right? What was Stetson Bennett's ranking coming out of high school when he graduated in 2003?
What the shade, man. That's so good stuff.
But I'm joking, but what was Ladd McConkey's ranking coming out of high school?
I have no idea.
Brock Bowers is ranked pretty high. Sure. The point is they have dudes that are very important to their championship team. Some were ranked really high and some weren't. Right? And that's kind of my point.
Yep.
Who's the dude for them this year on defense, Ryan? It's Jalen Carter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Carter's a great player, number 14 player in the country.
Yep.
Who was the kid that was considered their best defensive lineman last year, right? The guy that won the top 15. The guy that everybody obsessed over. What was he ranked coming out of high school? Number 414. Number 414 player in the country.
Yeah.
Right? So, that's kind of the point is guys that eventually become great players come out of all shapes and sizes.
Yep.
Right? And that's the key. Notre Dame we're not going to lie to y'all and say, hey, look, Notre Dame's going to be just fine. Give me a bunch of grinders and they're going to win championships. No. The 1988 team had stars. Yeah, they had their Frank Stams and the Wes Pritchetts who were just good football players, great veterans, leaders. But they also had some, the Mark Greens, right? They had, you could go down the list of guys, Stan Smagalas, guys like that. But they had some dudes. They had Rocket. They had Ricky Waters. They had Todd Light. They had Chris Zorich. Andy Heck, I think, was a first-round draft pick, right, as an offensive lineman who was a blocking tight end for Notre Dame until his last year. George Williams, when his head was on straight, was a dude. Michael Stonebreaker was a dude in college. Pat Terrell was a dude in college. Right? Now, not all of them were highly ranked players. Some of them were, though. Right? So you need your Frank Stams and your Wes Pritchetts and your Stan Smagalas, but you also need your Todd Lights, Rocket Ismails, and Ricky Waters and Chris Zorich's as well.
No doubt.
And how did I leave off Tony Rice? Right? Who's a dude in college? To me, that's the thing is you've got to have those guys, right? Notre Dame's not winning championships with a bunch of grinders. They're just not.
I agree.
Wicked Bronco Productions. Do we know what time Freeman is meeting with Bowen? Also, is there any reason Notre Dame has been so hush-hush about their transfer targets, unlike most teams? Well, number one, I don't know what time. Last intel we got at the beginning of the show was that he would be meeting tonight. I don't know what time that's going to be. So we shall see. I think a big reason they want to keep him hush-hush is because, number one, it's like I think Archer made a point during the show, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason teams are coming after Notre Dame and Ohio State's recruits and not trying to poach Bama's and Georgia's.
That's
why?
True.
I don't have to outbid Notre Dame. I don't have to outbid Ohio State. Not the way that I have to with Georgia and Alabama. I'm not outbidding Alabama. I'm not outbidding Oklahoma. I can outbid Notre Dame because they're not bidding anything.
Exactly.
And that's why schools are coming after their kids. Well, the transfer portal's similar. As soon as people find out that Notre Dame's in on a kid, what are other schools that may want that kid do?
Outbid them.
Because some teams would think, hey, man, like we're going to sneak this kid because nobody else is really going after this kid. Mm-hmm. So then the kid says, well, what are you going to offer me? Well, I'll offer you, $30,000, $50,000. All right, cool, whatever. And then all of a sudden he just signs with Notre Dame, right? Who they didn't even know was a player maybe for this kid. I think there's some of that gamesmanship. The other part of it too is if they listed every kid they've talked to, then all of a sudden they're spending all this time. Like I'll put it like this. There's a small handful of quarterbacks that Notre Dame likes, like that we really want. They've talked to a lot more than that small handful. So if all these kids here, well, you're talking to like all these quarterbacks, like you must not really like me. How does that help Notre Dame at all if we report that?
Yeah.
If we report that Notre Dame's talking to a receiver, right, and we know that the talks are very rudimentary, like initial, hey, just trying to gauge your interest level. We're not even sure if we're taking a receiver. Then what does that say to Braylon James and Jaden Greathouse and Deion Colsey and Tobias Merriweather and those guys? Oh, man, Notre Dame's looking to replace you. Well, not really. They're looking for depth. Hey, are you interested in coming and doing this, this, and this? And then it doesn't pan out that way. And then all of a sudden it looks like what it wasn't, right? When then also if a kid picks another school, you got beat by that kid. Well, not really. We liked the kid. We talked to him, but we never actually offered him a scholarship. But it looks like he got beat. There's just a lot of reasons why you don't need to get that stuff out there, right? Just let it play out. And then when work behind the scenes and then get that kid's name on the dotted line. That's what you need to do because it's a really quick, intense process. And if you have to spend all your time dealing with the blowback of you talk to this many receivers or defensive linemen or, like you talk to this corner, no, like that's the other thing too, is there's stuff getting out there that's not even true. I think most of the stuff we've seen about guys that are looking at it are either they offered but didn't really offer. Mm-hmm. Oh, you guys lost to Kansas State for Keegan Johnson. No, they were never really pursuing Keegan. I mean, like it was never really a thing, That's why, Ryan. I mean, I have no problem with it, right? No. Like, I mean, I'd love to put that stuff out there because that's constant clickbait crap and we can make money off of it, but it's not good for Notre Dame for that stuff to get out there.
I mean, Brian, like even think about Caleb Smith announcing that he's visiting this weekend, right? The Virginia Tech transfer wide receiver. I'm sure Notre Dame's probably like, hey, take that down. Don't let people know about that.
For real.
Like,
for real.
Seriously.
No, I mean, because that's why. It's like, okay, well, now teams that are desperate for receivers are going to start saying, well, we need a receiver, so let's offer that kid $1 million.
Exactly. So somebody said it on the board or on Twitter, the same thing you just said. And I just want to reiterate it because I was just like, that's so true. Like, I thought about it, but I hadn't really thought about it. Like, it seems like everybody's going after Notre Dame commits, right? Like you talk about Dylan Edwards and the Peyton Bowen stuff and all that type of stuff, right? Well, that's a smart move on the other team's part, right? And it makes sense. Like Notre Dame is one of those teams where they're not offering that upfront money, so why wouldn't you try to poach a couple of their guys? Right? Like, it makes sense. It does. It's a sad truth, but it is a truth, right? Like that is a situation now. I mean, because one thing, Brian, a lot of these colleges that I've seen, right, we call the NFL a copycat league. I feel like recruiting is a copycat league a lot too. I mean, do you remember when Brandon Hillman first got offered a scholarship by someone and then all of a sudden it just rolled in. Like, no one was talking about that kid before that happened. And then all of a sudden he's a hot commodity for everyone because he was just under the radar for whatever reason.
Right.
So,
yep, absolutely. Next question. If you're Milton fan, I love this. I'm going to tell Vince this one. I'd pay $2 million in NIL to Vince for caveman voice. Yeah, I'll tell you what, Milton fan, once that check clears my account, I'll give Vince half. Well, let me rephrase that. I'll give the government half, and then I'll give Vince half of what's left over. I'll give Vince 75% of what's left over, and he'll do the caveman thing before every show. So, yes. So once that $2 million
of his life.
Yep. Every show. So, yeah. Get you my account information or give my address. You can send me that $2 million check, and then we'll get that sucker. Well, matter of fact, we'll run a promo. We'll record Vince doing it and play it at the end of every show.
That'd be great.
So,
we should do that regardless. No fan, do not send that over to Super Chat though. Brian wants a check.
Please. I don't want Google to take half and then the government take the other half. You know what I mean? So
do not Super Chat that guy.
Irish blooded. What's the Shamrock Club? So signing up for membership, you can sign annual or monthly, and those are those fees. But we also created what's called the Irish Breakdown Booster Club, because people had asked, I want to support you beyond that. And I've had people say, well, I think your membership cost should cost more. So, okay, well, you have the option to pay more, right? Like, because not everybody can afford. Like, if I've had one of the things that people said, and I appreciate the sentiment behind it, was part of the reason you have people on your board that, more people on your board that may take our stuff is because it's cheap. You should raise your prices. And I was like, I appreciate the sentiment, and that would probably work, but I don't want to punish the 99% of our people on our board that aren't doing anything wrong because a couple people are jackholes, right? And I don't want to make our site less affordable for people who are doing it the right way and are respecting what we do. I just don't want to do that. We have to live with certain things until I can legally start handling some of those kind of things, right? But if you're someone who can afford to pay more and think that this site is worth more, then we created a booster club that allowed people to do that. So the Shamrock Club is the first level. It's $100. The Blue Club is $150, and the Gold Club is $200. And then we're also working on we'll have in the New Year's just sort of a thing where if people want to donate money, they can just donate money, which we appreciate, obviously. So that's what that is, and it's a thank you type of thing. It doesn't come with necessarily extra special benefits other than a extra special thank you for me, but it's just a way that people can support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown. So that's what the Shamrock Club is. Ant VR says, what do you guys think about the concept of paying players to play for your college football team? I've been wrestling with this question, not sure where I stand. So Ryan, we kind of talked about this beginning, and yeah, this is a question that was asked before the show started. Mm-hmm. So I think in some ways that we answered it, but I would say I am actually okay with college football players being paid by the NCAA and by their schools if it's a situation where that was just here's the flat rate. You take whatever the revenue is, and let's say you're gonna split up. Let's just say it's $30 million, just for argument's sake. I'm just throwing out a random number. I don't know if that's how much it'd be. You're gonna take $30 million. Mm-hmm. And it goes simply to, if you're on scholarship at a college football program, Division I college football program, we're going to take, and it's got to come from something that like, here's the problem. You get into some Title IX stuff and you have to, but let's say you're finding a way where you're able to take that money and pay, or let's say they break off of the college and they become just a, sports league or whatever that are tied into colleges that way. And somehow they can work around Title IX or whatever. Mm-hmm. You're going to take that $30 million and you're going to split it between every scholarship football player at whatever level. Okay. So, okay, we're going to give this amount to the 65 Power 5 schools plus Notre Dame. And we're going to give this amount spread out to the other conferences, which maybe isn't as much. And those conferences are going to get X amount of dollars. And these kids, so as long as you are on scholarship and in good academic standing, meaning you're eligible to play and those type of things, then that's what you get. And if you're a quarterback, you don't get more. If you're a lineman, you don't get less. If you're a kicker, if you're on scholarship, this is what you get. And I would be okay with something like that, where it's sort of like a rev share with the kids who are part of the production. Because here's what a lot of these players don't understand. If every Division I player this offseason said, I'm not playing next year unless I get my money, every FCS player and Division II player would transfer to those schools. And guess what? Fans are still going to freaking watch the games because it's not about you. It's about the golden helmet. It's about the scarlet and gray. It's about the winged helmet. It's about, fight on. It's about Boomer Sooner. It's about that because they're going to still be Notre Dame fans when you leave. Mm-hmm. They're going to still be fans of whatever when you leave. Right? And so there's going to be plenty of kids that are going to say, I'll take that deal because I'm paying my own way to a Division III school. I get a half scholarship at this Division I AA school, right? Yeah, sign me up. Yeah, use me, right? Because I get a free education at Notre Dame and I get a flat rate of whatever amount of, you know what I mean? Like, there are kids that would be willing to do that. For sure. And guess what? Fans are still going to watch. 100%. Because it's not about you. And that's what I don't think a lot of these kids understand, in my opinion, right? NFL's different. Right? We've seen that when there's been the lockouts. But like that now it's kind of different because you knew that this was kind of happening, right? So that's my thing is it's different in college football. So I don't want to get into the system where a player's negotiating with the NCAA or his team that, well, I'm the starting quarterback, so I want this, which then leads to holdouts,
right?
Which that, all this other nonsense, right? And if you're going to sign a contract where you're getting paid to play, guess what? In the NFL, if you don't do your job, you get fired. If you're coaches leave, yeah, because and also here's the other thing. Cool, let's make you guys like coaches. You can leave whenever you want, but you know what else we can do? If I gave you $2 million as a true freshman and you suck, sorry, buddy, you're cut and you're not getting that, and we're not paying you the rest of your bonus, right? Because you're not an employee. And there's a lot of benefits that come from not being an employee that you lose that I don't think a lot of these kids understand. A lot of these people that support that don't understand. And here's the other thing. Where's that money go? You're not – that $30 million is all of a sudden just going to the players if you're negotiating it, right? Because now all the agents get their bigger cut. Yes. All the union lawyers get their extra cut. And all of a sudden, like, man, I thought this was going to be a lot more money. Like, what happened?
And then we're going to start talking about signing bonuses. We're going to start talking about, the escalators in contracts, the backlog of money in contracts, the per year average per contract. And and that is that's something I'm not looking forward to, Brian, because then I will my job is going to morph into, this recruit got this contract and this is how it's broken down per year. And this is the escalators he has. And this is the roster bonus. This is the signing bonus. And then we get into some really gray areas moving forward, to say the least.
Right.
You imagine all the lawsuits too? Like, oh no, I was promised this amount of money. And you didn't give me enough money. And yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not good.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yep. All right. Next question. But I think that's a very fair question. Right?
It is.
Like, that's what I'd be okay with that. Because I don't consider that pay for play. I consider that is reward for being a part of a very giant money making machine.
Right. Because
because every kid's getting a cut of that. I'm okay with that.
It's like a cog in the machine type of thing. Yeah.
A very important cog. Right.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying players don't matter. I'm saying they don't matter as much as they think that they do.
100%.
Is my point.
Yep.
Because like Isaiah Foskey's going to the NFL. Is Notre Dame fans going to stop rooting for Notre Dame next year because they don't have Isaiah Foskey? No, they're going to keep rooting for whoever the next kid is that's going to step in a defensive end. And that doesn't mean they didn't love and appreciate and respect Isaiah Foskey. Most did. I did. I mean, I love what that kid did. I have such great respect for what he and Michael Mayer brought to Notre Dame and left for Notre Dame.
Yep.
But Michael Mayer's gone. Best tight end Notre Dame might have ever had. Fans are going to still watch. They're going to cheer for the next tight end that puts on the gold helmet because it's about the gold helmet. And kids used to understand that a lot more than they do now. And I think a lot of that's, what our society has become. It's just, you don't know what it's like to walk away from $2 million. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Right? It's not easy. I'm a grown man, and it wasn't easy. But sometimes you say, but it's not what's best for me long term. And Ryan, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
It's not what's best for me and my company long term. I'm willing to bet on myself to do that. And I just wish we weren't in a society that just made it seem like, well, as long as you get that bag, it's all good. No, it's not. It's not all good because that bag's going to, first of all, half that bag's going to be gone like that. It's called taxes, right? The second part of it is what fee are you giving your handlers? What fee are you giving your lawyers? All of a sudden, how much of that are you giving to your parents? How much are you giving that to your whoever? How much are you giving that to whoever? All of a sudden, that $2 million doesn't last very long, and you're at a school that's not giving you the kind of education that's going to be that's going to define your family generationally. You're not being developed to become the football player that you're capable of being, and all of a sudden, you were a potential first-round pick that's going in round 5, and you got nothing left of that $2 million. This is hypothetically, kind of, you know what I mean? This isn't meant to be a shot at Peyton Bowen at all. It's just in general. It's now all of a sudden that $2 million, that $3 million, that $4 million, $8 million for Nico, right? The thing that I liked about Nico is, yeah, he took money, but he took money from a school that fits what he can be as a football player. That's
Absolutely.
smart.
Yep.
Right? People say, well, Keon Keeley took money. Okay, let's say he did. But he's going to a football school, or that has a history of producing high NFL draft picks at his position.
And Keon was
that's a smarter
honest,
decision,
man. And he was always honest about it.
Always honest. And when things started to go, he started to have change of heart. Immediately told Notre Dame what was going on. Immediately.
Yep.
And so, but he didn't just take the biggest. I guarantee you, if Alabama offered him money, let's just say hypothetically they did, I promise you it was not the biggest offer he got.
I guarantee you that too. Yeah.
But his thing was Keon. I may not agree with his ultimate decision, but Keon looked at this as like, my biggest value is as a football player. Mm-hmm. What place can I go to that has a more proven track record of taking people like me and turning them into high draft picks? If you're looking at it that way, it's hard to argue against the decision he made.
Sure.
He made a smart decision, even though it's not one I necessarily agreed with. But what I agree with doesn't matter. I mean, my dad didn't agree with every decision I ever made, still supported me.
Sure.
And that's how I feel about Keon. I think he did it the right way. He was honest. He was upfront. And he made a decision that went beyond what, do I think that there was an NIL influence in this? Yes, I do. Do I think that was the only thing that, or even the number one thing that factored into Keon's decision? No, I don't. I think Keon was thinking more long-term, football-wise. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. If that's what's important to him, bro, be honest with Notre Dame about it and go do you. Mm-hmm. And that's what he did.
Yep.
So that's why you'll see me rooting for Keon. That's why Ryan congratulated Keon when, publicly when he made his decision for Bama. It hurt my heart, sure. Because I still want to see him in Notre Dame, but I'm pulling for that kid.
He's a good kid, man.
Yeah.
Good kid. Yep.
But he was straight up about it.
Yep.
And as soon as he started having those feelings, he let Notre Dame know about it.
Mm-hmm.
How can I argue that?
And you don't have to agree with someone all the time to respect them and wish them the best, right? Like you don't have to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. All right, next one, Irish blooded. Doing the NIL and the transfer portal so close to one another and not creating good black and white rules for both is killing the sport. That's what makes me think it was done on purpose.
That it's so intertwined now.
I think the fact that they made both of those decisions almost back to back of each other, I think is what makes me believe that they did this on purpose. That they did this to say, okay, fine, you want it, you got it. Right? Hey, coaches, you want this, you got it. Hey, players, you want this, you got it. Have fun, Wild West. We're not going to do anything about it. Don't come crying to us when you're losing this player, that player, when you're losing starters to the portal. Don't come crying to us. Right. You wanted it. You wanted NIL. You wanted this. Now you want us to go regulate it. Now they should be doing that. I'm not saying they're right in not regulating it, but this is what makes me think, Ryan, that they're doing this to destroy the system and show the flaws. Then they can come in as the saviors of the world, of the college football world.
You think they have a better system that they're ready to put in place just at the right moment? Like, we have the solution. Here we are.
Just randomly came up with this solution, And
we haven't even thought about this. This is just something that we we're just talking about this morning. Here we go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Next one from Dan V. Who do you think will be a surprise performer in the bowl game? Follow up. Who do you hope takes a big step forward with their performance in the bowl game outside of, I think he meant quarterback is what I think he meant. So Ryan, first part of the question, who do you believe will be the surprise? We talked a little bit about breakout yesterday. Who do you think will be the surprise performer? And I'll let you kind of have whatever freedom you want to take from that question, Ryan, as far as what that means for surprise.
Holden Stace was my guy yesterday. Mm-hmm. I'm sticking with this one. I don't know why. There's just, partly why is because Michael Mayer's not playing in the game. So there's going to be opportunities at tight ends. You're going to see Mitchell Evans. I'm sure you're going to see Holden Stace as well. I think Holden Stace just has a little bit more of an upside as a pass catcher. So right now than Mitchell Evans. So I think that he only has one reception on the season. So we're talking about an ultimate wild card here. But I have a feeling that Holden's going to have a couple catches, maybe a big gain out of those catches. And I think that he's going to be a player that's going to surprise some folks in the passing game, just in the game in general. So give me Holden Stace, man. I don't know what it is, but I feel like he's going to have a game.
I like that one. How about defense, Ryan? Is there anybody?
Defense,
surprise.
I said Joshua Burnham, right? And but I'll say this. I think I'm going to go a different way here because I want to see Joshua Burnham. I'll be very interested to see how many reps he gets, what he does. I'm going to call this the Riley Mills breakout game, Brian.
Okay.
You see Riley Mills be pretty solid to good throughout most of the season. Like he hasn't played bad football. It just hasn't been consistent as far as the disruption that he's created. I'm going to say this is a game where you're like, okay, Riley, now going into 2023, no Isaiah Foskey to be the guy. Does he take that step? I'm going to say that this is one of the best games that Riley Mills has all year.
Good one. My surprise on defense is Jaden Mickey. I think Jaden Mickey's going to have a really big game. You kind of started talking about it earlier in the game, right? I was asking something different, but you thought I was going a different direction. Mm-hmm. I'm going Jay. I think he's just going to have a really big game. I do. I think a little bit of humility is a good thing for football players. And I don't even call it humility like he needed to be humbled. I just mean like, failure for players is if you've got the right mindset, failure can be the best thing that ever happened to you. Right. And I think that's a good, you can go back to a lot of guys and failure could be something as simple like I was sitting on the bench as a freshman. I didn't get any playing time. Okay. You failed to show your, whatever. And that can be good for you. And I think that's true. I think it's going to be true for Jaden Mickey is some of the struggles he had, he's going to be able to get in the film room. He's a worker. Everybody we've ever talked to about Jaden Mickey, he's a worker. Yeah. And he's talented. So I think he's my sort of surprise player. He's going to be part of the rotation. I don't know if he's going to start or not outside. We'll see if they put Tariq outside. I would imagine they'll probably do more nickel with Tariq in the slot. I think we'll see some of Tariq outside as well. I think Jaden Mickey's my pick for surprise player on defense.
I hope so. That kid's had a lot of miscues, obviously, but the thing that you love about Jaden Mickey is he's very confident, right? So he's not going to back down. He's going to come in ready to play. So I hope that he's kind of become a little bit of a freshman whipping boy for some people already this year. So I hope he has a big game to end the year.
My surprise players. Oh, sorry, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think people forget that he's only a freshman. So just want to throw that in.
Yeah. Yep. My other one would be on offense is going to be Mitchell Evans. I think Mitchell Evans is going to produce. I think he's going to have like 5-6 catches in this game. That's my prediction. Wow. Right. And
does he have like 2 in his career right now?
2 career catches. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
So I think we're going to see more 11 personnel, some 21 personnel with him in the game, and they're not going to be paying attention to him because they're going to say, what, Ryan? What are they going to say in the game plan? The dude's got 2 career catches.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Let's worry about the 6'5" dude that's been balling the last couple of weeks, Deion Colsey. Let's worry about them running backs. Let's worry about Lorenzo Styles and these other cats, right? 88? Don't worry about that guy. Mm-hmm. Right. And then all of a sudden, and I think most of them will be in the first half. That's what I think. Because then I think they're going to, oh, shoot. And then they'll make adjustments. And then second half, it's, other guys playing well. So those are my two surprise players, Mitchell Evans on offense and Jaden Mickey on defense.
We both had a tight end, and it was a different tight end. That's interesting.
Yeah. Just kind of thinking about the personnel. Yeah. Who do you hope takes a big step forward with their performance in the bowl game outside of quarterback?
Mine would have been Jaden Mickey, which you just mentioned, right? Like I hope, again, he's played a lot of football this year. It's been some ups and a lot of downs, if we're being honest, right? There's been a lot of inconsistencies, but he's a freshman corner who's learning, and he has a great competitive spirit. He's not going to back down. He's going to keep talking his talk, even when he's struggling. So I hope that he has a bounce back performance because it's been a tumultuous season for him, but I think that he has everything that you need in order to be successful. And I think that he's going to take these 15 practices and the film study that you alluded to seriously. And I think he's going to be ready to play.
Yeah, I agree. For me what about offense, Ryan?
Offensively, maybe a little Lorenzo Styles, hopefully. Like I'm hoping, right? Because one thing that we haven't talked about as much with Lorenzo is Lorenzo had a really rough middle of the season, right? Like it was not great. But the last couple of games, he's starting to look a little more confident. I hope he's getting out of his head, and hopefully these 15 practices kind of let him clear his head a little bit. And hopefully he ends the season with the best game of the season. I hope, because, man, I still really like the talent. It's just kid needs to get out of his own way right now.
Mm-hmm. My guy that I hope takes a big step forward on offense, I think I would say receivers one where I'm with you, Ryan, and I don't care who it is. I hope it's one of or both of Deion Colsey and Tobias Merriweather. I really want those big guys to step up because I think that's where the direction this offense needs to head. But I think a guy that I am really ultimately going to go with, if I have to pick one, because you took receiver, so I'm just going to add on to your receiver take of, make it one of the three, if not two of the three.
Yep.
This is also kind of a bit of a prediction too.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a feeling that Blake Fisher is going to come out in this bowl game and go off.
Think so?
Because it's not a jealousy thing. Let me make sure that people understand what I'm about to say. I don't think he looks at Joe Walton as jealous of Joe's success. He's probably real happy for him. It's more of if I know Blake like I think I do, he's going to look at that and say, that's my dude right there. I'm happy for him. But you know what? I should be doing that too.
Sure.
Right? And I'm not getting on the freshman All-American teams and all this kind of stuff, but I know I'm that guy. Let me go on and show it. So he started playing a little better down the stretch of the season, right? A little bit more consistent down the stretch. I just have this feeling that Joe Walt's going to be Joe Walt, but Blake Fisher's going to go out and be like, hey, y'all, don't forget about me, right? Because I'm the dude that won that left tackle job at first before I got hurt, which allowed Joe to step in. I'm that dude too. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to – that's kind of my hope, because I think you go into next year with those two dudes is like y'all may have 2 first-team All-Americans in offensive tackle next year. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility, because most of the best tackles in the country this year, Ryan, are gone, right? Skoronski's gone, right?
Paris Johnson.
Yeah, Paris Johnson's – he hasn't declared yet, but we think that he's going to go pro after the bowl game, right? Yep. So there's that window, right? So Joe Walt's going to have the not the hype, because that makes it – Joe Walt's going to have the name recognition. So if he plays well, he'll still have that.
He's going to be a first-team preseason All-American.
Right, right.
Exactly.
And as long as he keeps playing like he's playing, it's just, and then out of nowhere comes this cat over number 54, and you're like, yo, this dude is a dude, a flat-out dude. So I could see that. That's my one on offense. Defense, who do I hope takes a big step forward? You already said it, Ryan. It's Riley Mills. I mean, right? Like, they need him to become we talked about early in the show, who's going to be that dude that steps up and like takes over. And Riley Mills needs to start turning he's shown flashes of being a playmaker. Yep. I don't want to see you're a junior. I don't want to see flashes anymore.
Really good talent, man. Really good talents. Yep.
I mean, you've had NFL people reaching out to you. I understand why Notre Dame fans don't appreciate Riley's talent, because it doesn't equal enough production.
Sure.
I want to see that change in the bowl game. So who I hope takes a big step forward, I hope it's Riley Mills. I'm Blake Fisher on offense, Riley Mills on defense, because you already said receiver, and then I added a couple receivers to your potential.
You just took the all off the bus team, right?
Yes.
You want Riley Mills and Blake Fisher to walk off
first. Look, if I'm coming into a team this year, right? Yeah. If I'm getting off the bus, there's 5 dudes that are guaranteed to get off the bus in some order. And I'm probably going tallest to shortest. Mm-hmm. Joe Walt's getting off the bus first, because he is a mountain, right? Yes, then Blake's coming behind him. Then Foskey's coming behind him. Yep. Riley Mills is coming behind him. And the last dude off the bus with that swagger is Isaiah Foskey. Those are the 5 dudes that are getting off the bus first.
You said Foskey twice.
No, I said Alt,
Fisher,
Mayer.
Oh, Mayer.
Okay. I might. Okay. So I said, okay. So Fisher, Foskey, Mills, and Mayer. Those are my 5.
Got it. Yeah. Got it. Well, you're not going to get Aldrich Estime off that bus, man. No. I don't know.
To me, the first thing you want to, when you get off the bus, is you get those. He's coming off the bus last.
Yeah.
Here's why: you get those big dudes come off the bus first, and you're like, oh, these guys are like giants, long arms, strong, big, muscular. And you're like, oh, okay, all right, the receivers are getting off the bus. Okay, cool. And then all of a sudden, Estime gets off last. You're like, what? Dude, come on. No, that's you're playing head games with people. That's exactly how my head games would be. I'm getting the mountains off the bus first, and then Aldrich is going to get off. Him and Jadarian Price are my last 2 dudes off the bus, and they're the only 2 cats I'm allowing to go sleeveless when they get off the bus. Right?
That's funny.
Everybody else is going to have their travel suit on, but I'm like, hey, Aldrich, Jadarian, y'all cats, you take your travel jackets off. go sleeveless.
Make sure you did some.
Do a couple push-ups in the back of the bus before y'all cats get off the bus, right? And get off flexing. That's what. Because have you guys seen Jadarian Price lately?
Yes.
Notre Dame will have the all Mr. Olympia looking running back room next year with Jadarian Price and Audric Estime.
The first time I saw Jadarian this season, when I think it was Dylan McCullough posted one of those pictures, I was like, I thought he was a scat back kind of kid. That's not a scat back, man. He's not a scat back. It's crazy.
Yep.
Seeing those guys. Brian's got the all Monstar team coming off the bus, though. I love
yes.
It, man.
Off first. Yes. But I'm rounding it up at the end with those cats, right? I mean, that's the thing. There was a short Monstar in there too, so it's acceptable, man. They had a Muggsy Bogues one. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep. That's right. Here's a question that I found very hilarious. We Are Not Marshall said, what would you rather happen? Taking a punch from Mike Tyson or in his prime, or being tackled by LT? If I'm being tackled by Lawrence Taylor, I could maybe start to run and then he tackles me from behind. You know what I mean? Yeah. And even if he hits me with a blind side, I have a helmet, shoulder pads on, and rib pads and knee pads and thigh pads. If I'm getting punched in the face from Mike Tyson, I'm out.
Yes. You might die.
I'm out.
You might die.
I might die. Dude, I'm going to wake up and my wife's going to have found a new husband. They've been married for 9 years because I've been in a coma for a decade. You know what I mean?
Might never wake up.
Taking a punch from Mike Tyson? Are you nuts?
As long as I don't have to be in the pocket against LT, like I need to probably running back if I'm getting tackled by LT. I don't want any Joe Theismann stuff to happen, man. Don't want that to happen.
That would be. Yeah, I mean that's not I don't count that as like taking a hit though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like just getting lit up blindside style. Like that would suck. That would hurt. That would not be fun.
Have you ever seen? That reminds me of. Have you ever watched Pros versus Joes? You ever watch that show? It's so funny, man. They have like retired athletes, and you have to like play them in their sports, and they would have stuff like that. They would have like a pass linebacker that you have to try to score a touchdown on like the 2-yard line, 1-on-1 and stuff like that. It's hysterical. It's so funny. Yeah. You need to go watch it.
I may. We'll see. Is it a TV show, like a series, like
it was
American Gladiators used to be?
Yeah. Okay. It was cool, man. Okay. It was cool.
All right. I get to the next question. Here we go. Here's one for you, Ryan. I'll let you answer this one. I talked a little bit about it yesterday. Give you kind of some thoughts on it today. Benjamin Carchi says, what do you guys think about moving Marist to Viper? I think I've kind of shared my opinions a couple times, Ryan. I want to allow you to give your full thoughts on that.
I think the best spot for Marist Liufau moving forward is a little bit of a hybrid role, right? I don't think he's a full-time Viper, but I think that there is definitely some packages and some looks where he, as a athletic drop end that has a little more experience working in coverage, especially when you kind of want to do some zone drop stuff, I think that he can do a lot of stuff at Viper. So he's got explosiveness, he's got length. In a Viper role too, you can kind of make it a little more niche as far as what you want him to do, right? Like his 1 or 2 responsibilities on a play aside out. 1 or 2 responsibilities on a play in comparison to him being a read and react player. So I'm a fan of it in certain instances, right? Like he's definitely not going to be a full-time player because he's only 235 pounds. And if I start putting too much weight on his frame, also, I don't want to zap him of his athleticism because that's what he brings to the table, right? So I don't want to make it a full-time thing, but I think there's certain instances where you put him at Viper and you just kind of let him go, just take the shackles off. Let him go. Don't make him read and react. Make him, this is your responsibility, Maris. Go make the play. And I think that can be successful in spurts.
Tom Flavin says, Indy will need a much different pass game plan. Brian, as a former OC, which wide receivers would you feature? So I was a pass game coordinator, never full OC. Had a role in calling plays, but was never the OC. I mean, with the makeup of this team, well, I'll say this. Like, okay, let's say I was Tommy Reese's advisor. Because I think this is a better way of looking at it. Because I think that's more pertinent. Let's say Tommy Reese called me and say, Brian, I don't want to hire an analyst, but you're a straight shooter. Let's sit down and talk some ball. Who do you think I should feature in this game? I'd have to look at Tommy Reese's system, the personnel, the things I think he likes to do when his offense has thrived. And the thing I see is I see he likes long, vertical, outside players, reliable inside players. So I'd feature Dion and Tobias outside. I would feature Jaden Thomas in the slot. I would have, let the tight end battle be who it is. And I would those would be my featured receivers. And then Lorenzo Styles would sort of be my jack of all trades, moving him around, doing some different things. He would be my guy I put in the game. I send him on motions. I throw him some screens. I let him run some crossers and drags and try to get him the ball in some different ways. But maybe with this current team, he may not, with the way he played this year, he's not my dude. He's not my 1 or 2. Now, he could eventually be that guy and be your X or be your Z, and he's your guy. And then Jaden Thomas becomes your jack of all trades, or Tobias or Dion or whatever. But that's what I would do right now. Because right now, I just think Lorenzo still needs to kind of get his head on straight. There's some off with him. He's dropping balls that, that kid doesn't drop those passes, right? I mean, he's dropping simple stuff with no one near him, crossers, hitches, stop routes, things like that. So that's kind of how I look at it, right? I would say I would go there. And then, of course, you asked about wide receivers. So that's why I'm not focusing on the tight ends and the running backs, but you said wide receivers. That would be my focus as far as for the bowl game. That would be my focus for the bowl game. Anything to add or push back on or take away from that?
I'm pretty much on. Hey, I think one thing that we 100% agree on is I want the skyscrapers outside, right? Yeah. I want Tobias. I want Deion Colzie 100%. I'm okay with there being a little bit of a rotation inside as far as, some opportunities for Jaden Thomas, some opportunities for Lorenzo Styles. Then I agree that Lorenzo can kind of be your Swiss Army knife as far as that wide receiver. But my non-negotiable is that Deion Colzie and Tobias Merriweather are my 2 main outside receivers. No doubt about it.
We're going to have some cleaning up to do on the message board when we get back there, Ryan. Somebody just put a thing down, and it's a lot of negativity. So we're going to have to put a wine thread. Like, if you want to complain, do it here. So there we go.
That's hysterical, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely hysterical.
Yep. So here we go. Let's go to some more questions here. We have some super chats down here. I actually want to make this comment. Larry Friedel says, as a Browns fan, I wish Elway had stuck with baseball.
Dude, that Browns team was so good, man.
They were, man.
Every single time.
They were. You had Kevin Mack and Ernest Biner at running back, and
Bernie
Reggie
Kosar.
Langhorne, Webster Slaughter receiver, Bernie Kosar, Ozzie Newsome at tight end. Linebacker, you had Clay Matthews and Carl Banks at linebacker.
Good team, man.
Had 2 really good corners. It was Hanford Dixon and Frank Minifield, right? You had Felix Wright at safety on some of those teams. Like, those are some really good Browns teams. They went against the GOAT, and that's just the reality of it. So, 0 for 3. And I lived in Cleveland Brown territory, and every single year Browns fans talk crazy trash to me leading up to that game. Because I was an even bigger Broncos fan at that age than I was a Notre Dame fan. Like, I didn't really become a Notre Dame fan until I was like 10. I was like a Broncos fan almost out of the womb, my dad said. Like, as soon as Elway came to the league, like at 5, I was like, that's my guy. At 5. That's funny. So, like, it wasn't really until they'd been in a couple Super Bowls that I really became a Notre Dame fan. I was a Broncos fan. Like, elementary school, Broncos. And I remember we had a teacher, Mr. Hanthorne, who was a family friend, so don't take this the wrong way. But, I was kind of running my mouth a little bit. I think on the second one, he picks me up, puts me up against the lockers. It was like in good fun. And we had some fun with that one. But I very much enjoyed that. The problem is I then would talk trash going into the Super Bowl, and it never worked out well for me till I was in college. The first Super Bowl the Broncos won, I was a freshman in college, but they lost all the ones that I was in, that they were in younger. So I would run my mouth. I wouldn't say anything leading up to the game against the Browns, but after the game, I talked a lot of trash. And then my parents were Redskins fans. And so I think I was like 10. I think it was 87. So I'd have been 9. And I had my Broncos jersey on, my away jersey and all that stuff. And Broncos go up 10-0 in the first quarter. And I've always been a trash talker. And I'm talking trash. And by halftime, and my dad didn't say a word. What's he going to do? Argue with a 9-year-old? But by halftime, it's 35-10. And I'm like in tears. I'm throwing my jersey down. And that was my first life lesson, because the talk my dad had with me was you need to learn to win with class. Your team was winning and you acted like a knucklehead. You're feeling bad now, not just because your team's losing, because you feel like, I don't know if he said it like this, but like that was the takeaway was you feel like an idiot because you kept running your mouth and your team couldn't back it up. So lose with grace, or lose with class, win with grace. is kind of the lesson that I was taught growing up. And that was a firsthand lesson that was as a Broncos fan going into that one. So Sicky13 says, just got my IB dark gray polo. So that'd be this one right here, which you can get in the merch store in the mail yesterday. Great quality. Well, worth it. I'm glad you liked it. Got a super chat here from Lux ND with a super chat here. Says, hey, all, hearing on local news that Tennessee has a bunch of early enrollees starting practices today. Could Notre Dame do this? 15 extra practices. Ryan, I don't know what Tennessee's system is, but basically the semester has to start. Mm-hmm. They can't play, but they can be in the practices. The problem is you can't do that until you enroll. Notre Dame semester doesn't begin until January. Mm-hmm. Now, some people are on quarter systems, so the quarter may have already started, and then there's Christmas break, and then the quarter resumes when you get back in January. That's how some schools are. So if you're in a quarter system, there's a chance that some of the early enrollees have already enrolled in the second quarter, I believe. Now, I don't know if that's true at Tennessee. I'm just giving you a potential scenario. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't. Notre Dame doesn't have a loophole. I don't know if there's like a winter semester that may be able to enroll in. I'm not quite sure if it's that, but Notre Dame doesn't really have that option right now. Yep. So,
but they do have a lot of early enrollees that you should expect in January, which is nice. So,
Charlie Weiss's last belt loop, Coach, one last super chat. But why hasn't Notre Dame told the NCAA, or have they? And it's okay. Thanks for the note, kind of thing. Also, shout out to Drake Bowen. I don't know if I don't know if Notre Dame saying anything in the NCAA is going to change the thing. Like, guys, no one's hiding this. No one's hiding this. This is so out in the open. Like, nobody's hiding this stuff. If the NCAA wanted to blast teams, it would take them 10 minutes of research to figure, like I say hyperbolically, but it would not be hard to do. Not be hard to do.
Why not?
And so,
I think a lot of teams are probably frustrated with the NCAA, and I'm sure that there's been teams that have probably already, turned schools in, and I'm sure the NCAA is probably, and this is just my opinion, right? But I'm sure that the NCAA has probably turned the cheek a little bit because they've made this madness that it is, right? Like they made this Wild West, and that's where we're living right now. So I don't think it would matter even if Notre Dame did or didn't, if I'm being honest. But shout out to Drake Bowen. Agree 100%. That is a Notre Dame man. That is
that I am with. Yep, that I am with. So yes, that was and Christian Gray and Jeremiah Love and
Adon
James Greathouse,
Braylon James,
right, no doubt,
a lot of them.
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, right, Ryan, is if we believe that the NCAA knew this was coming, why would they then try to regulate it?
Right.
If they wanted it regulated, they would have laid down more firm guidelines and rules. They would have taken more time with it, and they would have created this system in place to stop it. I have a hard time believing that they just did not see this coming.
They just don't care. Or it's, I mean, you make a good point, man. Maybe this is like a test period for them to show that
they want.
It's broken. And I don't know. Sure.
Hey, okay. Like I'm sure like there's like I promise you'll probably have this conversation at some point in time with your daughter when she's old enough to have these. Okay, cool. You don't like what I'm doing. You don't like that, you don't think we should. Okay, cool. For the next week, you cook your own meals, you do your own laundry, you do, and then you see how much you love this life or not, right? Like, and then what happens after about 2 days, your daughter's like, okay, I'm sorry. I'll do whatever I need to do. I'll do my chores. I'll do this, just please get back to taking care of me. You know what I mean?
Juliet would never do that. She would never do that.
That's because she's your first.
She's already doing it, man. She's already doing it.
She's just a little too young for you to pull that on her. That would be then child abuse, So
Brian, every time I sing in the car now, she goes, "No, daddy, no, daddy, no, daddy." Okay, I get it. Don't sing.
You're like, I used to think I was pretty good at this.
I was never good at it. I was never good.
Patrick Tolan with a super chat. Raymond should take Justin Tuck with him to the Bowens to show what Notre Dame can do to people for life after football. I would tell you all that Notre Dame has had these conversations with. That's part of their recruiting process leading into. They've had the conversation with former players. They've had conversation with current players that are talking about the money they're making. The problem is that comes over time and you have to earn it. And if you're not a good player, you don't earn it. There's a difference between that and here's X amount of dollars.
Sure.
There's a difference.
Yep.
And that's the thing.
That's where we are, man.
Mark Stewart with a super chat says, throw in a hoodie with that gold club. You know what, Mark? I'm not going to do a hoodie because then it's like, okay, well then all my profits are gone. But it may not be a bad idea to up. I would have to raise the gold club higher, but to do that. But, it might not be a bad idea as like a T-shirt. Wouldn't be a bad idea with that.
Or a hat. Maybe a hat.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
Mark, are you a hat guy? Let us know, man.
Yeah, that might not be a bad idea, Ryan. Mark, I have to do that. Mark, do me a favor, buddy. Hit me up with you got my Twitter. You DM me all the time. Hit me up on that. I want to run a couple ideas by you. That's not a bad idea, Ryan.
No,
that's not a bad idea. I mean, because like the Gold Club, it's $200. It's like I wouldn't do that for Shamrock because it's like all the profits, all the helping me out would be gone. I just say, dude, just go sign up for the Shamrock and go buy a shirt. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't make but a buck or two off of that stuff,
right?
But Gold Club, it's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. I have to think about that one.
Mark, you're a trendsetter, Mark.
He is. Brent Smith said this. This was a really interesting one, Ryan. He says, "Do you think Deion Sanders in Colorado will be the first team to receive the NIL death penalty?"
No,
I'm going to say this, Ryan.
Yeah,
I could see that. Because here's what the NCAA will not do. It won't be Bama. It won't be Georgia. Sure. It won't be Oklahoma. It won't. That's why it was SMU, not Texas. Does anyone think SMU was necessarily doing something that wasn't already happening? It was you can't. You're SMU. You're not Texas. You're not Oklahoma. You're not Nebraska. You can't do this.
Nobody ever got a gold Trans Am before that. You don't know. What
right. Exactly. Well, here's the thing. The team that offered the gold Trans Am didn't get in trouble. It wasn't SMU. It was A&M. Yeah. It was called because what did they call it? They called it the something related to the Trans A&M or something like that. I think is what they called it back then. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what it was, but it wasn't even SMU that offered him that, right? So it's like, it was because you're SMU. You're not supposed to be doing this.
Texas A&M was offering money all the way back then.
Right,
wow.
right. Shocker, right?
Things haven't changed.
So it'll always be a program like this, and it wouldn't happen until after Deion leaves. That's what would happen. Deion would leave, then the NCAA would come in, then they would do all these things, then Colorado will get crushed. And it won't even be that Deion's doing anything different than what everybody else is doing, but it's like, well, they never set an example of Ohio State,
right?
Michigan, Bama. I probably shouldn't use Ohio State and Michigan the same way because they don't throw money around like these. It won't be Florida State. It won't be Alabama. It won't be Georgia. It won't be Texas. Right. It'll be Colorado. It'll be Missouri. It'll be South Carolina.
I think you made a good point, though, but it won't be until after Deion leaves because they'll never take Deion down.
Nope.
He's good for their brands. He's good for the whole.
Well, not only that, but could you imagine the PR campaign that Deion would wage against them and win?
Yes.
Handily win.
He would win easily. He would win easily. You're right. You're not
because he would not be afraid of them. He would be like, okay.
Oh, that's one thing is Deion does not lack for confidence in any regard.
Right. Yep. No doubt. Yes, that would be fun. That would be fun. All right. That's a good, like, I like where his head's there. Like, why Deion? Like, I don't know why Brent picked Deion, but I know why I would pick Colorado because you're a program the NCAA doesn't care about. They have no problem coming after you. Like, if we come to find like Arizona State, it wouldn't shock me if they just came down hard on Arizona State. Why? Is Herm Edwards doing something that wasn't happening in other places? Probably not. But you can't do that at Arizona State, man. If you want to do something like that, you need to go over to Texas.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that at South Carolina, man. If you want to do that, you need to go down to Georgia. They'll let you do that there. That's how the NCAA's always been, man. Or Notre Dame. So, yeah. Tyler Evans, what was your guy's favorite recruitment story and the player ended up at Notre Dame?
It's a recruitment story.
I mean, Mantis was pretty cool. Just kind of woke up one day and just felt God told him this is where he needs to go, even though when he went to bed that night, thought it was going to be something else. I'll say mine is this. Mine is, and I think it's very relevant to what's going on right now. Mine is this. The story goes this way, and I believe Corey Miners told the story. Corey Miners was a big-time recruit from California, like parade All-American, 5-star type, which is a modern day 5-star type of kid.
Mm-hmm.
Comes to Notre Dame, and I believe the story goes that he wasn't really feeling Notre Dame because it was cold. And I was told that it's like his mom stops him in the middle of campus. She basically says to him, I can buy you a coat. I can't buy you this. Meaning everything that Notre Dame is, the education, the pipeline. Now, Corey Minor, I believe he owns a bunch of McDomino's out in California, I believe, and is making a lot of money as a businessman, right? Now, he didn't pan out as a football player to the degree of what his ranking. He was a pretty good football player at Notre Dame, but he didn't pan out as and he played a little bit in the NFL for the Panthers. But he didn't sign some $100 million deal that he's now using to invest in that. He took what he did make and he's investing it in this, and he's a very successful guy. So, to me, that's one of my favorite stories. That's one of my favorite ones. Is that right there? It's that, yeah, that's one of my stories. That's one of my favorite stories. Is that right there, Ryan? You hear that and you're like, okay, this is a kid that gets it.
I love it.
This is a mom that gets it, I should say.
Yeah. I think it's not as Notre Dame centric as much, but one in 2023 that was pretty cool is the Sam Pendleton story, where basically Sam he doesn't believe in all the rivals camps, the Under Armour camps, all that type of stuff. So he was seriously under recruited, and he didn't start getting offers until pretty much the junior season that he started getting. And he called and wrote letters to Notre Dame, I think 3 separate times, and never got a return phone call at all. And then as soon as Harry Hiestand got in, he got on it. And Brian, just kind of that backstory, right? He was instantly I want to go to Notre Dame. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it was just, it's a big story of perseverance on his part, because he just did not stop, man. And he ended up blowing up. He had offers from Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, I think was in there at some points. So Sam Pendleton's, I think, is a fun one, because it's pretty different nowadays for those types of kids that do not care about all those camps and stars and all that type of stuff. He's one of those rare players, So
I think if we're going to look at this year's class, I think the Brandon Hillman one was pretty cool. Yeah, I think that was a pretty good one. I think, yeah. I think, kid comes into his senior year and he's got Norfolk State and I think it was Howard or something like that.
Yes.
That was a pretty cool one.
Yeah.
That was a pretty cool one. It's a pretty cool one. So Ryan, that's going to do it for today's show. Great stuff today. Quick thought: we will probably have 2 shows tomorrow. I think maybe we'll have to see about that. Number 1, number 2. I will be at the beginning of. I'm going to be on with Sean Stiers tonight, 6:00, IB Nation Sports Talk. I will be on there at the beginning of that show for a little bit, and then I believe he's going to have Tom Noy on after that to talk a little bit hoops. A little bit. So we'll kind of dive into some of those things. So 6:00, IB Nation Sports Talk. I'll be there. And then, of course, tomorrow the guys will be having a IB Nation, the new rapid fire that they're doing on Friday. And we have a couple other things planned that are going to be a lot of fun. But we'll be back tomorrow at 1:00 for our, Ryan, what are we doing? Friday free for all
mailbag.
Yes, sir. No doubt. It's going to be a lot of fun. So that'll be a blast. I'm looking forward to that. And of course, hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check out our main site at irishbreakdown.com. Subscribe to CFB Nation channel, folks, everybody. The podcast form, not just the YouTube channel, but if you're looking at the YouTube channel, please watch some of those videos we have. I know that some of them are old, but we're going to put some new ones up here this weekend. They're going to have some stuff. The CFB Nation guys had some really good segments the last couple of days that I'm going to turn on and put on the videos. John Garcia's got some high school stuff that we're going to put onto there as well. So that'll be a lot of fun. But make sure that you are still rocking with us. We can continue to always bring the good intel, and it was good intel, okay? And we'll always talk about that stuff. So we appreciate all the support that y'all have given us the last 2 days. It means a lot. It really, really does mean a lot. So thank you all so much. For Ryan, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.